in the back, I think that's, yeah, there she is. He graduated from Christ for the Nations Bible College, Dowlings College, and SUNY Stony Brook with a master's. He's the pastor of this church over here in Farmingville. He's the chairman of the Long Island Family Coalition, high school social studies teacher. He's a debater, and he's done already 16 publicly moderated debates. He's an apologist and former candidate for New York State Legislature. And on my left, we have MC Washington. He told me to introduce him like that. He graduated from Rutgers University with a degree in philosophy and economics. He's the guest speaker at several colleges on the topics about religion and atheism. Participated in many online and radio discussions concerning religion in America. He runs the YouTube channel Philosophy Man 76 with videos addressing atheism and religion. So we're just going to flip a coin. Bruce has heads and MC Wash has tails. So who goes first is what it lands on?
Whoever wins the toss gets the pick.
Oh. Okay, so heads, Bruce, tails, Washington. It's tails. Da, da, da. Okay. So MC Wash, what would you like?
I'll defer. Take the to Bruce. I'll let Bruce go.
Okay, we'll let Bruce go first. So we're gonna start with our 20-minute opening statement.
Okay, just gotta work out a few technical things here. I have a couple of glitches with technology, so before we start the clock, we're gonna make sure everything's working right. So let's just make sure we got that. Okay, good. I think we're okay. Now, when I'm done, David, are you ready to go with Matthews? Okay. All right. Go ahead. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We're going to get right to business here. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that when we are done with the debate, we're going to have a brief break, and there's a book table in the back that you can peruse. And if you're interested in any of those books, just see me for the price. Some of it's actually free, but just want to point that out. The card you have in your hand is also for questions, so if you have any questions, please feel free. We're going to have a Q&A following the debate. For myself, you can address a question to, or to Matthew, so either one, so please be aware of that. This evening we're looking at the question of where did everything come from, and that is the fundamental question of life. It's where, when, who, what, how did this all come about? And there are two fundamental answers to that, and that's creation, which I'll be supporting and defending, and there's evolution, or naturalism, as we're going to find out. It's an actual philosophy, and creation also be a philosophy, but it's better explaining what we actually find around us. So this evening we want to go right into the question and look at the fact that there's only two possible answers to the question, where did the universe come from? Because the universe actually is everything that we know of in terms of physical matter. So either A, it was created from something or someone other than itself, or it had always existed. Well, we know in our day and age, because of all the scientific advancements, that answer number two has been scientifically been disproven. Therefore, answer number one must be true. But the question was, is it someone or something that created it? The universe is a thing, thus it couldn't create itself, since that would violate the most basic law of logic, the law of self-contradiction. Nothing plus nothing equals zero. As a scientific fact, we understand that the universe was created by someone, and that is God. And that's also buttressed by the fact that philosophy, logic, mathematics, morality, aesthetics also support the very existence or being, better put, of God himself. So it's not just the natural sciences, the physical sciences that point us clearly to God being the originator of all that there is. We have also the social sciences as well there to buttress the very fact that God is the best explanation for how everything came to be. Of course, we have the first law of thermodynamics, that in fact, once the creation was put into place, that matter cannot be created again, and it can't be destroyed either. It's just manifestations of energy, and that energy, of course, all came from God. The second law of thermodynamics would also buttress this fact that as time goes on, entropy or disorder increases, and you don't get more complex things, you get less complex things. I.e., look at your teenager's bedroom. Okay, look at your car that sits out in the driveway, especially after a long Island winter. It doesn't get better, it degrades, it rusts, it gets dirty, and so on. So things do not self-assemble. In fact, apart from God's creative power, they actually disassemble, and they become more chaotic. So actually, everything we know from the very beginning of basic knowledge goes against this idea of self-assemblage, is what my opponent is going to argue this evening, that things just came out of nothing, that they just self-assembled. The universe, the solar system, the Earth, Moon system, all the living things, and so on. Now here's a picture of Murch's Inlet out here on the east end of Long Island, and you'll find that these rocks here are put in an arranged diameter. There's an actual arrangement here of the rocks, okay? And if you look at it from this angle here, it actually can be seen that people put through intelligent design, through intelligence, these rocks here to form a jetty so that the inlet would be maintained as a thoroughfare for water, okay? And like a diameter goes through a circle, you have a straight line of rocks here, a straight line of rocks there, intersecting, okay, this area we call Murch's Inlet, clearly showing design, clearly showing that intelligence had to put it there. Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, another good example of intelligence. All right, we talk about God, we know that He's all intelligent. God has all knowledge, right? And Mount Rushmore clearly shows a mind at work. Of course, these were human minds that actually put this together, the chiseling and all the work that went into it. But nonetheless, it shows evidence of design. If there's design, you must have a designer. Now, if we go on to the other incredible discoveries in recent times, okay, Michael Turner of the University of Chicago, calling the cosmic background explorer the greatest discovery, unbelievably important. They have found the holy grail of cosmology. It is the discovery of the century, if not all time. Stephen Hawking says, what we've found is evidence for the birth of the universe. It's like looking at God. George Smoot from UC Berkeley. What they're talking about, of course, is the fact that the universe actually had a beginning. We can actually prove that scientifically now through various measurements. Whether you call it inflationary theory, some people call it the Big Bang, you want to call it the creation event, it definitely had a beginning. It did not come from itself, and this is absolutely indisputable in science. The astrophysicists and the cosmologists, those whole areas of science, they will not debate it one iota because it's just simply a fact. Now, Fred Hoyle says this: the common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. You know, Fred Hoyle is not a card-carrying fundamentalist Christian. All right, he's actually a non-Christian astrophysicist who, looking at the universe, can clearly see design, can clearly prove from scientific measurements that in fact the universe had a beginning, that galaxies had a beginning. If they had a beginning and if they are designed, they must have a designer and a creator who is eternal himself, all right, who always has been there. And that is the biblical definition of God, that He is the self-existent one, the I am. He's just always been there. And in fact, being a Trinity, He's always creating at least new thoughts and possibly even new universes and worlds. But we know He at least had two creations before this one, the angels and this present universe and Earth-Moon system that we live in. Of course, we call it the Milky Way galaxy, right? Galaxies themselves show that it can't be an infinite amount of time, that they actually will wind down. They've been created and they'll wind down, just like the sun will eventually absorb the planets into it. And if it was billions of years old, the planets should have already been absorbed into it, for example. So that's evidence right there that it's probably not billions of years old. But even if it is, we just know that the sun itself had a beginning because it would be infinitely big and couldn't actually support the life here on Earth. Now, George Greenstein says this: as we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency, or rather agency, must be involved. Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of Supreme Being? Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? Okay, these are the questions that are being asked today. These are not card-carrying Christians, all right? These are not Christians. These are just inquirers as to science using basic scientific data. Paul Davies says it this way. He says, there is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make a universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. All right, so again, if you have design, you must have a designer. The new watchmaker argument, as it's been called, is also taking the parameters that we're finding in both chemistry and physics, astrophysics, cosmogony, as well as cosmology, okay, which is astrophysics again, and what you're seeing is that there are extremely fine-tuned parameters that we are discovering that absolutely eliminate the probabilities that this could have just been simply the result of naturalistic just happenstance, all right? The idea that luck or chance or random molecular collisions could make a universe that's so finely tuned that 10 to the 100th power place on the average of over 5,000 parameters. All right, just picture that, 10 to the 100th. You know what I mean? That's 10 with 100 zeros there. That's one chance out of that number happening 5,000 times. It's not that it won't happen. It can't happen. It can't happen. It's just too finely tuned. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the mass of a neutron or electromagnetic force to gravity ratio. All right, it doesn't matter if you're talking about the expansion rate of the universe, the cosmological constant. Okay, these are very finely tuned parameters. You can even talk about simple things like air pressure. All right, the very idea of us having water on this planet where there's no other planet with appreciable water on it, etc. The parameters are very finely tuned. 23.5 degree tilt, all right, to make 4 seasons. This is very, extremely complicated system, all right, beyond anything we can imagine. Then we have Michael Denton, the famous agnostic from Australia, biochemist, who says this about biological evolution. He says, all the evidence available in the biological sciences supports the core proposition of traditional natural theology, that the cosmos is specially designed whole with life and mankind as its fundamental goal and purpose, a whole in which all facets of reality, from the size of galaxies to the thermal capacity of water, have their meaning and an explanation in essential fact. Again, this is not a Christian, right? This is an agnostic admitting to this. In fact, he's the author of the book over there, Evolution of Theory and Crisis, magnum opus that really systematically deconstructs the evolutionary, macroevolutionary story that is told to our children in our tax-supported schools, universities, colleges, and really in the media as well. It's a systematic brainwashing that's going on, that this is in fact scientifically been proven that we are the result of just naturalistic processes, the universe, our solar system, we ourselves, and that somehow this is what you can get from just billions of years of naturalism, materialism. It just doesn't compute. Where did our solar system come from? Well, there's only 2 options. It evolved from gas and dust, or was created by God. Well, the only logical answer to this is that, in fact, it was created by God. How do we know that? Because we've never witnessed gas and dust making a planet or a star. It's never been witnessed. Of course, the evolutionists said, well, you got to give it a few billion years. Well, what a convenient excuse. What a convenient way to answer that. Okay, but the science better is explained by the omnipotent power of God putting together the stars and the universe, the solar system, etc., the planets. Okay, so God's power could create a solar system like we see, the dynamics and precision we see. That's the only way you can explain the fine-tuning. It's the only way you can explain the present understanding of geology, physics, and biology. It's the only way you can explain it. Okay, if we look at biological evolution a little more deeper, we have to understand there's 2 types of evolution, of course. You have microevolution, the idea of like dogs evolving, let's say, into other types of dogs, right? A dog-like ancestor, the original kind that God created, then can have other types of dogs, other types of dog kind, right? So we have no problem with that. It's called genetic variation. It's a proven fact of biology. No one's disputing that there isn't change within a species. No one's disputing that. The question is, where did the first dog come from? Yep. You know, the evolutionists like to say we came from a primate-like ancestor. Where did the primate-like ancestor come from? All right? So that's really the question. And of course, the bigger question is, where did life come from? Because of course, the evolutionists still scratching their head. They tried making life in a laboratory, didn't work. At best, they made a proto-amino acid, right-handed, not even left-handed, that codes for protein. all right? And they never could even come close to synthesizing DNA. So when we talk about evolution, biological evolution, we're talking about actually the only true evolution that we can document in biology is microevolution, where this is predictable, it's observable, it's testable, right? You have changes within species, dogs changing into retrievers, terriers, bacteria becoming drug resistant, or different races of human beings. God made one type of race, right? And that race, of course, today is expressed in different ways. You have three basic races: African, you have Caucasian, you have Oriental. All right, we like to use the word race, but really there's only one human race if you go back to the beginning of where God made. And you'll see that when God made bacteria, it's the same thing. One type of bacteria, one kind of bacteria can mutate, and through natural selection and so on, can actually vary into other types of bacteria. All right, genetic variation through natural selection and mutations cannot cause, though, these genes to then add new DNA, new genetic information that would cause it to leap into a new class or phylum. That would be called macroevolution. Macroevolution has never been proven, and that is the major changes of living things where new classes and phylums are created. Okay, a primate-like creature, for example, becomes a human being, or a reptile becomes a mammal. That has not been proven. There's not one stitch of evidence for that. Zero. Has nothing to do with genetic variation. Genetic variation is a completely different phenomenon. Because why? The additional and more complex amount of DNA needed for such changes as what we just said above this, all right, has never been seen as a result of mutations or any other evolutionary device, natural selection et al. It just isn't there. Again, it's not that it can't happen. It's impossible for it to happen. All right, it's not that it won't happen. It can't happen. It's impossible. It can't. There's no mechanism. Macroevolution is still a complete speculation. It's not empirical science, but a philosophy. It's a philosophy of naturalism and materialism. So it's actually a belief system. All right, now, the 5 fatal problems of biological evolution, very simple, is no materialistic explanation how DNA, RNA, left-handed amino acids, and proteins can be assembled together by random molecular collisions. The most simple cell is more complex than the Space Shuttle Challenger. All right, how can the naturalistic forces arrange such a thing? The blue-green algae cell is more complex on a micro level than the Space Shuttle Challenger. There are no undisputed fossils in the fossil record. Not one is undisputed within the evolutionary community. Not one. The fossil record is only fully explained by a worldwide flood. Better than this idea of episodic and localized floods and burials, like the evolutionary point of view. And then finally, living creatures and plants exhibit a synchronicity of multiple systems that can't be explained by naturalism. What came first, for example, the bone marrow that makes blood, or the blood that nourishes the bone marrow? Now think of it, you got a circulatory system, you got a musculature system, you got a nervous system that works in perfect, I only touched on 3 of the many systems that works in perfect harmony. And they're all dependent one on each other. Which one came first? Well, evolution, it's slow gradations of improvement. That doesn't work. It has to be all or nothing, all or nothing. And that's critical as we look at this question this evening. Of course, we understand the day, when did evolution really die? In 1953, of course, when Watson and Crick discovered the DNA molecule, put to death once and for all this idea from goo to you by way of the zoo. It just can't happen. Why? Because it's too complex. The most simple cell, blue-green algae cell, you ready for this? The amount of code, the amount of intelligence that's in there, okay, the DNA code, will be equivalent to, Encyclopedia Britannica is about this high off the ground. All right, so it just can't happen. Again, the cell is too complex, all right? It's more complex than a space shuttle in outer space. It's just too many systems going on in there. It cannot be explained by naturalism. After all, if nature cannot make a paperclip, if nature cannot make a quarter, then how in the world can nature make an eyeball, an ear, or a brain, or even a simple cell, or even a simple DNA molecule? And by the way, you need proteins to make a DNA molecule. What came first? You see the conundrum? It can't happen. It's not that it won't happen. It can't happen. It's impossible. It violates the most fundamental laws of science. As we've pierced through new barriers of scientific knowledge in the last several decades, we've gotten more proof that evolution just simply can't happen. Even Time magazine said on the eve of the 21st century that one of the big discoveries, get this, is that creation is the better explanation. All right, Time magazine actually said this back in the turn of this. They predicted that it would happen. Look at this, the flagellum on a simple cell. The flagellum is a more complicated outboard motor This is a little micro picture of it. Look at that. You got a rotor, inner membrane, outer membrane, you got a hook, a bushing. All right, Michael Behe documented irreducible complexity in Darwin's black box, and he used this as an example, showing you that you cannot explain this through any naturalistic design. I'm sorry, not design, but idea. Any naturalistic means cannot account for the complexity here. Some responses and consequences of evolutionary thought providing evidence that evolution is not empirical science. All right? Well, first of all, Richard Dawkins goes like this. He says, it's plain truth that we're cousins of chimpanzees, somewhat more distant cousins of monkeys, more distant cousins still of aardvarks. Well, this is his opinion. He's not presenting proof. All right? And to go further, what you'll find is that that evolutionists, I'm running short on time, I have to skip around a few slides here, okay? Notice here the built-in assumptions, okay? Look at most favored races. Has racism been used has evolution been used as a justification for racism and other social horrors? Yes. Okay, yes it has. And you'll see that actually, whether it be Darwin or Adolf Hitler, have used evolution to advance their agenda. Look at the agenda here. Stephen Stanley, why would God be so wasteful and imprecise in his productions? Julian Huxley, why should organs that look so different and have such a different purpose as handling, crawling, flying, swimming all be constructed on the same general plan? Why? Well, who are you to ask God why he makes things the way he does? This is what's really driving evolution, is they have a problem with God. It's a problem with God. That's what's driving it. All right, so really, as C.S. Lewis establishes in the book God in the Dock, some people have a problem with God's sovereignty and they want to dismiss him altogether. Okay? In fact, this is it. Given the facts, evolution is the best of philosophy, and words, it's man's attempt to be God. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's going to be MC Wash with his 20-minute opening statement.
All right, so let me open up by first, thanking Bruce, thanking the church and for everyone for being here. I know the debate is, to show why evolutionary science is wrong, but at least by holding this debate, I really say commend the church for actually coming down, listening to open thoughts, and wanting to take the time to see an opposing view. With that being said, I do like the premise of the debate, which is, evolution or creation, which more accurately explains the evidence. And evidence is really what is important when you're looking at this this concept of, is it creationism or is it evolution? And so this kind of debate also is very hard for me personally as to defend evolution in a debate, because evolution ties into all the different sciences. Like every science has evolution as part of it. How do I move to the next slide?
Just click the wheel. Spin the wheel.
Awesome. Okay. So here's the thing. So as far as so when you're defending, this is why a lot of scientists do not get into debates like I don't know if anybody saw the Bill Nye versus Ken Ham debate. I am not Bill Nye. He knows a lot about science, and you can attack you have to know every single facet of these different fields of study in order you can attack anything. You can come and say, well, explain to me sexual reproduction. How did that evolve? Explain to me the fossil record. How did that happen? How did this? And so it's very challenging because evolution is such a large. It's such a large theory. It is a unifying theory. That's why we look at evolution as such a great theory, one of the greatest theories that we have as mankind, because it unifies all the other disciplines of science. All of them. I wanted to bring up an idea of what's called independent verification. Okay? So independent verification means something is true or more true the more independent methods are used to verify that belief. So, for example, if I have a tree and I want to find out how old the tree is, and the tree, we carbon date the tree, and the tree is 225 years old based on carbon dating. Then we look at endocrinology and the tree rings, and we say, okay, well, it says it's 225 years old based on that. And then there's a plaque next to the tree, and it says, this tree was planted the day the Constitution was signed in Philadelphia in 1787. You do the math, and go, oh, that's 225 years ago. So as you build more and more evidence, then you would say, okay, you would come more and more closer to truth of saying, right, the tree's 225 years, you don't have to keep going. So this is what happens when you make a tree of life with evolution. You can make a tree of life from genetics and DNA only, separate from everything else. You can take genetics and say, and I'll show a slide here, on how we can see the genetics of different organisms and how their DNA codes. And we can see the small differences between what's the difference between a human and a monkey, and also an aardvark. All right, you can see the small differences. You can make a tree, saying, okay, well, you'll see it in a minute. But you could do a geneticist could do it. Then you can make a completely different evolutionary tree based on embryology, how we develop as from a zygote, from a single cell to a person. For example, if you remember in ninth grade science, they teach you, you have a blastophore, and if you took a tennis ball and you put a thumb in it, okay, and you had an indentation. In humans and all mammals, that becomes the anus when it develops. In insects, that becomes the mouth, and that's the way it works for all mammals and insects. And you can make a tree just based upon, because every animal would then have a different change at some point during the development of the cells. Things would change and turn into a dolphin as opposed to turning into an aardvark. So you can make a complete evolutionary tree based upon that. You can do it from paleontology and look at just where fossil layers are, and you can make an evolutionary tree based upon that. You can do it based upon comparative anatomy and say, okay, there's different bones in your arm and a bat's wing, and also in a horse's leg, and you can say, okay, well, when you look at the bones, you can look at fossils and go back and see where just looking at the bones, this bone would have to, this bone here, it's gotten longer here, it's gotten shorter there, and you can make a tree based upon that. So, and these trees would all be independent of each other. Every different field of science could do this. You could have a leading geneticist and biologist and archaeologist all doing this work separately, and then all of their trees for every single animal on the planet all turn out the same. This is why evolution is true. So that's what happens when you do this. By the way, this is what happens. There is no conspiracy by scientists saying, we want to uphold the theory of evolution. Scientists are sometimes horrible people. Like, all they want to do is destroy your work. When you submit a paper to get published, it goes through something called peer review. And people who are also in that field tear it apart. They do the experiment, they try to find out what's wrong, they immediately just say, well, you probably have this wrong, you probably did this, and they do everything to try to tear it apart first. So all these different sciences and different fields of studies, they submit their work, and that's what supports evolution. So now sometimes they don't agree on the time frame, sometimes they don't agree on, it's a big planet. How it actually happened. Well, they're still doing science, where the science isn't finished. But the theory of evolution stays the same because the trees stay the same. And so it would be like somebody saying, well, I found the theory of gravity. Gravity is a theory. And we would say, oh, well, gravity. And then someone says, well, look, I put helium in this plastic thing and it floated away. Gravity doesn't work. It's like, no, it's not that gravity doesn't work. It just, maybe there's another explanation because the theory of gravity is pretty solid. So the theory of evolution, when they find a discovery or they find something, a lot of times I'm online and I see they found this new thing, and it's like evolution is gone. So we're just going to throw out all of the past evidence that we've had and then say, well, we found this one animal that was in the wrong spot, or we didn't figure it out, or something like that, and say, well, forget all the other evidence. It doesn't work that way. You have to then do further investigation. So, and by the way, if a scientist could disprove evolution, if they came up with work to do it, they would do it. They would do it in a heartbeat. They would win a Nobel Prize for this, for disproving evolution. Like, it would be nothing. There's nothing that would a scientist would be. That would be the number one thing. That would, yes, that would be like a physicist disproving gravity or disproving E equals mc squared. There would be news all over the place. They would be the best known scientists in the world. So the only people who find evidence that refutes evolution is creationists. And creationists do have the same opportunity to submit their work through peer review. They can do it just like anyone else. The problem is when they do it, since the science doesn't work and it's not credible, not that that person is incredible, because they don't know. When you submit a paper for publication, they don't go, is this a creationist? They just look at the work. And that's all with all scientists. Or you could do it. And they look at the work, and if it doesn't work, then they don't accept it. But instead of saying, well, our science doesn't work, or this thing that we're trying to do doesn't work, and it's not real, they say, well, the scientific community is trying to keep me out. And that's not the way it works. It would be like me and my friend saying the NFL is trying to keep us out of the NFL because we tried out and they don't want us in there. No, it's because we're not good enough to play in the NFL. if we were good enough to play in the NFL, they would have us in there. They would pay us millions of dollars to do it, but I'm not good enough to be in the NFL. So on that point, I am not a scientist. I am not a biologist, a chemist, a DNA specialist. I'm not a physicist, endocrinologist, a chemist, or a geologist. I'm not any of those things. I am very good at doing research. Everything I've learned about evolution, other than basic science, I don't remember learning about evolution in school. I just learned science, but I learned doing my own research. I must have spent hundreds of hours watching videos and learning about how evolution works, because I had questions too. I was like, well, how much time is needed for this to happen? And I didn't really understand it either. So not understanding it is one thing, that's fine, but go and find out what it is. It's very challenging for me, like even, it's very challenging for me when sometimes people will talk about evolution, but they don't know what evolution is, or how it works. And so, they don't know what a theory is. I'm gonna go through that in a minute as well. So, great. So by the way, even if I was like the #1 chemist in America, and I could give you all the chemistry on how evolution works, it still wouldn't mean I wouldn't be able to determine rock ages or the evolution of giraffes just because I'm the #1 chemist. I wouldn't know that stuff. And vice versa. If I study giraffes for my entire life and could come out tell you the exact evolution of a giraffe, it doesn't mean I know anything about DNA sequencing or any of these other fields of biology. So it's very challenging. It's a big topic. Evolution is a very big topic, and it's a lot of work to learn this stuff, even just putting together this information today for you. So being that it's a big topic, I'm going to say, I know we're going to have questions later, so I'm going to say I have basically 4 responses if I get any kind of questions that are, any questions. I'll have 4 responses. My first response will be, I know the answer, here it is. I got some of those. The second one is, yeah, you're right. I'll concede that point. I'm wrong in that case. I don't mind saying I'm wrong when I am. Right. Third, I know there's an answer, but I would have to look it up and find it for you. So sometimes I'll have someone ask me, what is the the thyroid gland can create thousands of different enzymes to regulate the body. How did evolution create that? My answer is I don't know. I have no clue how that happened. All right, so I wouldn't be able to tell you that. So you can't create a false dichotomy, though. You can't say a false dichotomy in philosophy is if you can't answer my question, then my answer is right. That's not true. All right. So and that's what a lot of times creationists will do. They'll say, well, how does this happen? Well, I don't know. We don't know how that happened. Well, then God did it. That's not saying that doesn't answer the question. It's not the I could say magic did it. You can have hundreds of other answers. There's a lot of dichotomies that came in here, as far as that goes. So you need to stick to, you need to actually have a reason. How did this happen? How did the designer do that? Well, I don't know how he did it. He's just God, and we can't comprehend his abilities and knowledge. Well, that's not. That doesn't. You can't do that. We can't get anywhere in knowledge that way. Just saying, well, we don't know, and God did it. So. Doesn't prove a point. So now it doesn't mean that we still have to come up with the answer to things. And when I say I don't know, it's not that I don't know. I personally don't know. You can look it up. A lot of these things you can go. Google's amazing, and you can find these things and find the answers and look back and forth. Anyway, so I spend a lot of time discussing evolution with people online and in person. And like I said, 95% of people I talk to don't even know what evolution is, how it works. And it's very upsetting. And it's very important that we use the same words when we're talking, because if you don't use the same words, it's very hard to have a dialogue and a conversation. So let me go here. So sometimes I hear this a lot. Well, evolution is just a theory. It's just a theory. You don't know. It's a theory. A theory versus a hypothesis. Theory is different in everyday terms than it is when you use it in science terms. When I say, oh, I have a theory, I can't find my car keys, gremlins must have hit them. That is not a theory. That is a hypothesis, right? If it was a scientific hypothesis. Right? A hypothesis is like a guess. A theory is not a guess. It's a, and there's no way I'm going to read that from here, but I have the actual definition of here. I had it here, so hold on a second. It's up there, you can read it. I'll read it from here when I get my picture up. Actually, you can read the actual definition. I'll just tell you what it is. A theory in science is after they have looked at all the observations and all the evidence, and they say, well, this is the most likely explanation of these phenomena. So something happens, I say, here's this is gravity, okay? The theory of gravity explains why that happens, but gravity is something that happens. The theory of gravity is, here's why it happens. Things that have mass, have attraction and all right? And so a theory is an explanation of fact. So evolution happens, things evolve. Bruce just said that things evolve, things change. The definition of evolve, okay, is a process in which changes in plants and animals happen over time. This is from Webster's dictionary, all right? A process of slow change and development, all right? So I don't think anybody in this room would say, well, that doesn't happen, Change happens. That's what evolve means, okay, to change. The theory of evolution is an explanation as to why evolution happens. The explanation of the diversity of life arising from this planet on Earth is a result of mutation, natural selection, and genetic drift. I'm not going to have time to explain that, but another thing that I will hear sometimes from creationists is, well, it's random. This is, how can this happen randomly? It is not. Evolution is not random. Right? A mutation is random, which is a part of what happens with evolution. A mutation happens in DNA. When a mutation happens, like a lot of times when a cell reproduces, it makes extra copy. It doesn't copy correctly all the time. There's mutations happen in cells. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So there's extra DNA. Now, when the extra DNA happens, there's things that can happen called a frame shift. Right? So what happens with the DNA, everybody knows the AGTC thing, all right? So, try whatever. All right, so the point is that when you have a 3-base pair, that codes in a DNA, you have a 3-base pair, and that codes for a protein, okay? So a GTC would make a certain type of protein, all right? And so if you had a GTC, and then you had an ATC, that would code for another protein. So what will happen sometimes, you get a frame shift, and one of the pair, like the C, might get deleted. And then when it copies, everything shifts over. So instead of GTC, it says GTA, because A was the next one in the first one in the third code. So that would then change everything in that DNA sequence all the way down the line. And it would make completely different enzymes and amino acids and proteins. And that DNA codes for how the protein folds, and that's what a mutation is. So mutations happen. When a mutation happens, now the non-random part is natural selection. So the environment then selects on if this mutation is beneficial and will keep the creature alive, all right? If it survives better in the environment. Doesn't mean stronger, doesn't mean faster, it doesn't mean better, it just means the environment. It's better in that, adapted to that environment. So if the beak of a bird gets thicker because of a mutation, and there are nuts around that some birds can't eat and this bird with the thicker beak can now break them, then that mutation was good, and those birds will survive better. Now, if that beak, causes that bird to not be able to open its mouth, okay, then those birds are going to die more, and so the environment is doing the selecting, and that's how it works. I'm not going to go through genetic drift because I don't have time. So the environment selects. It's like you roll the dice, and the environment says 6s are what we want. So, and if all the 6s that came up, they pull the 6s out, and then whatever's left, maybe say, oh, let's shake them up and roll them again, okay? And then there's more 6s. Eventually, you would have all 6s, all right? You're not, the environment's just picking. It's not the randomness is part of it, but the 6s are the part that's not random. So, with, gotcha. No way. Sorry. So you should be able to make predictions then with evolution. Here's a basic evolutionary tree of life. All right. If evolution is true, this is very basic, by the way, but this is what it will look like. All right. This is what a creationist tree of life. Everything is made independently, all by itself. They were all made the way they are. So if that was true, what would happen is the stratification. Evolution would say, well, down here, the deeper you go, the less complex these organisms would be. And this is what actually we find when we dig and go on archaeological digs or paleontological digs. They actually use evolution to find things now. They say, okay, we're trying to find this animal that would have this kind of, we know where this animal is, it's got a long nose, and this animal has a short nose. So in between there should be something that's a middle-sized nose. And then they can actually say, well, it should be at this time, this would be happening, and that's how far down they dig, and that's how they find these particular animals. This is how they find some of these fossils. So if creationist was true and everything was made in its current form, everything would be all over the place because everything lived together at the same time. So there would be no stratification at all. Why would there be stratification? You would find humans living with trilobites, with dinosaurs. You would find all the fossils spread out evenly throughout all different levels. But this is not what happens when they do searches. 1 minute. All right, I'll do this one really quickly. Prediction 2 is organisms would retain, if evolution was true, organisms would have genetics in them that from their previous forms. If creation was true, there would be no need for these forms. There would be no need for chicken to have teeth. Chicken don't need teeth. In evolution, but chicken do have the genes for making teeth. Whales would not need bones for making legs. Why would a whale need that? Because they're a mammal, because in evolution we would say, yes, of course, that would make sense. They would have those genes because they evolved from mammals. Humans would not have genes for making tails, but we do, and they are. I'm sorry, I can see blood in church. All right, so in other words, I'll wrap up there and just say, on another high note, with the tail on the butt. All right, so.
Thank you, MC Washington. Now we're going to start our 10-minute rebuttals. Vice Bruce.
Thank you. We're not talking here, okay, about reproducing something that can't be reproduced. You cannot reproduce the origin of the universe. You can't reproduce the origin of the solar system, the Earth-Moon system, the biology of what we see around us. We're talking about the better explanation of what we are actually confronted with. And the better explanation, again, is creation. Why? Because it answers all of the categories of science. The word science means knowledge, by the way. That includes all knowledge, including metaphysical or supernatural knowledge. We have to be careful that we don't approach this with a narrow mind. My opponent just actually admitted that the geological timescale is used as the rose-colored glasses, so to speak, to interpret the information of fossils. All right. Now, these fossils do not show any macroevolutionary changes. There's not one that's indisputed. All right. My opponent didn't bring up one example, and there isn't any to bring up. All right. So there's no surprise there. Okay. But understand that what we're looking for here is a pattern of the better explanation, not to recapitulate a situation that cannot be recapitulated, certainly not in a test tube or in laboratory conditions. So let's get that off the table. All right, he's giving me, or any creationist, an impossible standard, okay, and that's a straw man fallacy that we're going to just remove right from the get-go. We understand that peer review actually has been attempted. There have been plenty of creation scientists. There are many in the scientific community. But as Ben Stein in his great movie Expelled documented, as well as other books and literature documented, that anybody in the scientific community who has a bent towards creationism or intelligent design is usually and frequently told that they could not submit their papers or even docked from their jobs or even fired from their jobs, denied tenure at universities and so on. This is well documented in literature. The NFL is another false analogy that Matt is bringing up this evening. This is not just raw talent, just stand up. Okay, in fact, the evolutionary community is a very closed-minded community, very narrow community that's driven by billions of dollars in the textbook industry, in the educational industry. And yes, it is an industry, absolutely an industry. And there are absolute desires and designs to keep evolution as the superintending creation story or myth that supports atheism and agnosticism, which is the underlying current behind evolution. Don't forget, Charles Darwin was not a trained scientist. He became an agnostic when his 10-year-old daughter died. He had a problem with God for allowing it. Let's not forget this. All right? So understand that it's not science being driven, science driving anything here. It's people's opinions. Like the opinion we just saw here. You have a whale. Yes, it's got bones in the bottom. Is anyone a boat in here? You know what ballast is? That's a great ballast. It's also an anchoring point for several muscles for the whale, especially in reproduction and so on. Your coccyx bone, by the way, does not grow tails. Your coccyx bone, again, is needed for the gluteus maximus and other, we won't go into detail, things that we need to do as human beings, okay, but it actually has a real function. And that is actually a gross mutation, that appendage. And there's other appendages that come out like that in different parts of the body as well that are not a tail, all right? And that is not a true tail, what you just saw there. So that's a bogus picture representing a bogus idea. The actual claim that DNA can make this supposed extra DNA. It's interesting, the Human Genome Project was just wrapped up by Francis Collins, who by the way is a creationist. And Francis Collins blew away the myth that we're only 0.01 to 1.3% difference in our DNA composite to a chimpanzee. Blew it away completely. All right, now the better estimates are somewhere between 82%, get this, 68%, depending upon the type of DNA composite you're comparing to chimpanzees. So actually, as we're learning more about DNA, in fact, we're learning that junk DNA doesn't really exist. That the junk DNA turns to actually have very critical uses and designs for it. By the way, if you look at the word strawberry as an example, okay, DNA is a code. So let's use it as an example, the word strawberry. Well, yes, you can have strawberries or strawberryness, but once you take away several key letters, you no longer have strawberry at all, whether it's plural or its essence, strawberryness. If you take out, let's say, the A, or you take out the W, what do you have? You don't have any semblance of that word, but you can add. So microevolution is like going from like a strawberry to strawberryness or strawberries, but once you take away several key letters, you no longer have that at all, the idea of a strawberry at all, and what do you have? You have nothing. You have just an assemblage of letters, and that's what macroevolution is right now. For my opponent to establish that we came from a primate ancestor, and before that a bear, and before that a dog, and before that pond scum 3.5 billion years ago, he has to establish that you can actually take these letters, okay, out of the word strawberry and still have strawberry consistently. And it's just impossible. It cannot happen. It's too much needed to go from pond scum to a human being. It just doesn't, it can't happen. The geological timescale, again, is my opponent's worldview, his assumption, his presupposition as to actually what he believes happened, and then it's just read through those glasses as to when fossils are unearthed. Well, it has to be this way, and we're going to date the fossil based upon, get this, the rock it's found in. Well, the rock that it's founded in is going to be based upon the assumption of a decay of radiometric isotopes, uranium, lead, rubidium, strontium, potassium, argon, whatever, and we're going to assume that they decay at a certain rate. Why? Because we have to prove that this particular fossil was found in rock at this particular age. Again, reading their assumptions into the assemblage of data, instead of being the neutral spectator, like a detective coming to a crime scene and looking at the evidence from a neutral point of view without drawing assumptions from the get-go. What we have is a community of scientists who are driven to maintain the status quo of de facto agnosticism and atheism. the theology, all right, of naturalism, and it is a philosophy, it is a theology, if you will, all right, that there is nothing out there but energy, that this universe simply always existed, contrary to the fact that it hasn't, contrary to the fact that natural energy cannot produce a quarter, it cannot produce a paperclip, it cannot produce amino acids, it can't produce DNA, it can't produce RNA, and they have no business going in and describing a whale, a fully formed whale, you know how complex a whale is, all right, and saying just because it has 2 bones in the back that it came from a cow hanging out by the water that lost its legs. And this is exactly what we're told. That whales came from cows that lost their legs because they were hanging out by the water. That's right. And then all of a sudden started growing a little hole through the head. You can't make this stuff up. We're told that a caterpillar becoming a butterfly is just some random situation. A beautiful sunset is a random situation. The cry of a baby is a random situation. The taste of lemon meringue pie is a random situation. Seriously? No, this is not science. This is speculation. This is a belief. This is a worldview. This is naturalism, driven by a contempt for God, driven by a despisement of God. How do we know this? Again, we can go back to the quotes we just read in my opening. We can go back to all kinds of misuse of evolution by Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, who in the millions have killed people under the banner of Darwinistic, neo-Darwinistic, punctual equilibrium evolution, however you want to put it. They killed people saying, I'm more evolved than you, survival of the fittest, I got the gun, you don't, boom! Done. We've just advanced our civilization, we've advanced our species, because I got rid of a weaker person who's just drawing away precious resources. For after all, this is just get one life, and this is the only life we have, we've got to make it good. We need communism, we need egalitarianism, and if you can stand in our way, go on. That's what's driving evolution. Notice the lack of fact, any fact here showing that we really came about from some naturalistic process, from pond scum 3.5 billion years ago, from a primate-like ancestor. Not one. Okay, you can't take a mutation which is deleterious, it's taking away letters out of a word, it ultimately makes the word invalid. At a certain point, mutations will ultimately kill an organism, will ultimately make it die, like cancer, sickle cell anemia are good examples of mutations. It kills the organism. It's not good. And any other mutations, the 0.05 that happen to be neutral, like for example, instead of having straight hair, you have curly hair, they don't advance into a new phylum or class. That's the kind of information we need to affirm the stupendous, the unbelievable statement that nature can make the universe, can make the solar system, can make the Earth-Moon system, and can make all living things. That is an incredible statement that science laughs at, that science says is impossible to happen. And you were being told it, not by facts, but by belief.
Thank you. 10-minute rebuttal from MC Washington.
Wow. All right. That's a lot of stuff there. And I'm amazed. First of all, he started off by saying one, I got so many notes. All right, so my picture apparently that came off of PubMed, which were actual functioning tails. All right, you can go and look and verify that. They had undermuscular control, and these were actual tails. So the fact, I don't think that was a picture of the inlet. How about that? It could have been a picture of anything. So he tells me that I'm making a straw man, and then I would love to see the scientific paper that says cows turned into whales. That would be that is a straw man if I've ever heard that, because I've never said that, and I've never seen a paper that says that. It says cows and whales might have a common ancestor. There's a difference between those two things. So so to say stuff like, oh, how do you accuse someone of having a straw man argument when it says pond scum turned into humans? I don't remember saying that. I don't remember anything saying that. I said humans have a common ancestor with all the other orangutans, monkeys, and that, and then it goes back from there. And they have a common ancestor with something else. It didn't come from pond scum. So this idea of microevolution versus macroevolution was said a couple of times. Scientists don't use these words. There is no macroevolution and microevolution in science. There's evolution. microevolution and macroevolution come up by creationists to say, well, because they had to say, they had to have some kind of answer for breeding of dogs. They said, well, that's microevolution. So basically what you're telling me is that if we make small changes happen, all right? So if something keeps changing small, if I want to walk, like I can walk from my door to the porch, and then I can walk from the porch to my front step, and I can walk from my front step to my front lawn, but I can never get across the street. It will never happen. It's impossible. It's only microevolution can happen, not macroevolution. So where's the difference? Look at your hands. Where does your hand stop and your wrist start? Exactly. Where's the exact point? Okay, you can't come up with it. That's just what happens with evolution. It's not like one thing happened, like a bird a dinosaur gave birth to a bird one day, and all of a sudden there was two different things. No, that's not how it worked. There are small changes that accumulated to them. We say, well, that thing looks like a bird. We're going to call that a bird. A bird is just what we call it. That's just our term for it because it looks different than a dog. But if we popped on Earth right now and we saw all the different species of dog that exist, we might go, you know what, that little thing and that big Great Dane and that Chihuahua, those aren't. Might name them something else. We might say the little things are, whatever, okay, tiny things, and these are, big things, and they look completely different, and they can't mate with each other. So well, I guess that's just microevolution. So the point being is, as time goes on, things just change, and we classify them because we need to be able to call them different things. But it's all coming from the same system. Let me go back to the original points here. I do want to point out that the debates on evolution, and a lot of times this happens. Evolution is the theory that explains the diversity of life on planet Earth. That is all it is. It is not Big Bang theory. It is not abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is a theory on how life started. Big Bang theory is a theory on how the universe started. These things have nothing to do with evolution. So to talk about one is not even on topic as far as that goes. Talking about the second law of thermodynamics, I love that one. So everything's breaking down. How many of you guys started off as babies? Oh, all of you. All right. So, are you Benjamin Buttons? Are you going backwards? How's that working? Okay, because the second law of thermodynamics is talking about the entire universe, but not individual things in the universe. Okay, the second law of thermodynamics is that systems are breaking down unless you add a source of energy. The reason why you grew is because you added energy. You eat food. Okay, and so therefore you're adding energy, and that's why you can grow. On planet Earth, evolution can happen because there's this thing called the sun, okay, that adds energy to the planet every single day. Lots of it. It causes all the plants to grow and everything to grow. We have external source of energy. So the law of thermodynamics does not apply to what happens on Earth as far as that works out. And it's nothing to do with evolution anyway. So I started as one cell and now I'm trillion cells. Let me see here. Fine-tuning, that whole part, all right? So the odds of, I don't know if, well, it's a church, maybe no one's ever been to a casino, all right? So, but if you ever played poker, okay? If you ever played poker, the odds of getting a royal flush, I don't know what they are, but it's really hard, okay? If you're to get the 10 through ace with only 5 cards, all the same suit, okay? Now, whatever those odds are, let's say it's 1 in a million, right? Okay. What are the odds of getting a 2 of spades, a 4 of clubs, a king of diamonds, and whatever? You get 5 different cards. The same exact odds. It's the same exact odds to get random or any 5 cards. It's the same odds that set of cards would be dealt to you. But we look at a royal flush as special. So therefore we go, wow, that's amazing. Okay. Well. Yeah, you can talk about the odds of anything happening, but the fact that there is something, there are the odds that anything else could have happened. It's like, oh, well, look at how special Earth is because it's got water on it and it's tilted this particular way. Great. I checked, there was other planets that aren't like that. Okay, so we look at this one and go, wow, look how special this one is. Well, the other planets aren't like that. So actually 1 in 8, or 1 in 7 now, right? 1 in 8 is 8 now. is the special one with water, okay? Or if you were a rock on Jupiter, you could say, wow, Jupiter's so special. It's got this big eye of the storm going on there, and it's been going on forever. And so just picking your characteristics that you think are special and then going, well, what are the odds of this happening, is just, it's the same odds as anything happening. So if anything happens at all, of course there's going to be crazy odds of that happening. But something has to happen. So if something happens, then the odds don't really matter. Evolution, we evolved the way we did because the environment is the way it is. It's not like, if it was different, we would evolve different, okay? There's no evolution on Venus because they have a massive greenhouse effect going on. That's why. And so that environment doesn't allow humans to grow on it. Gotcha. All right, so, one of the comments made was, we've never witnessed solar systems happening. Yes, we have. Go online. Look. They're happening right now. They're watching. They have, as they look into space, they can see different types of stars and solar systems in different stages because it's happening all over the place. So, therefore, they have. So there's some things that were said that are just wrong. Look it up. We were watching. This is how we come up with these theories. And when we talked about the age of the rocks, and we don't start. Once we have established something in science, you don't start all over again. You don't have to go, okay, well, now we got to test and see if the decay, if this is right. Once we figure out something's right and it works all the time, then we use that to do something else. We don't have to start from scratch all over again. By the way, we also said we've never come close to creating DNA. Look up Craig Venter when you go home. Okay, he's created already synthetic life. He took a cell, put into it DNA totally made up himself, and booted up a cell up to nothing, or started life from non-life. Done. So again, science continues on. You have to watch these things, and I like watching this stuff. But these things are out there. The old methods of saying we can't figure this stuff out isn't true. Yeah. So, as far as DNA codes, as far as the randomness, this is another typical creation thing. Is like, like a tornado couldn't go through a junk heap and create a 747, natural processes can't make quarters and paper clips. So, right, because quarters and paper clips and 747s are not living matter. Okay, they don't grow. So it's when you cut yourself, it grows back. Your skin heals. All right. So evolution is living matter. It's not random everything just being thrown in the air and falling together. That's not what it is. That's why that example is completely false. And by the way, all these things that the quotes that he sent was my last point. He threw up a lot of quotes there. A lot of those things were opinions. Okay, the one that wasn't an opinion was the one he had up there from Dawkins, because he can actually take his statement and show you trees of life that show that. The other ones were, well, I don't know how this is, so therefore maybe God must have done it. That is not a good answer, or at least it's not a valid answer. Thank you.
Thank you, MC Wash. We're going to start our cross-examination soon. Can we see if that mic's working?
Test?
Yeah.
And Bruce is going to start off with the cross-examination.
Okay. You mentioned that the idea of a quarter or a paperclip being manufactured by nature can happen, but yet living material, which is far more complex, can happen. Can you explain why nature can't make a quarter or a paperclip? It can make an eyeball or a brain or an ear?
I'll talk about it.
It's working.
All right. The reason they can or cannot is because of the environment doesn't need quarters. We need quarters, so we make them. That's just kind of how it goes. It's just iron. The environment did make iron. We just shaped it the way we wanted to shape it because that was beneficial to us. Eyes, if you look at the evolution of eyes, are beneficial to animals. So they evolved, and you can look up the evolution of an eye, and it'll tell you, it would start off as just a slit, and then as things got better, the survivability of an eye or brain or this or that caused that animal to work better. If you could see a little, instead of seeing light, if you could see a little bit of clarity, you can now avoid creatures more. And then those animals would then live and pass on their genes.
All right, so you're saying that an eye thinks?
No, an eye doesn't think. It's not thinking. It's not like something makes itself evolve. It's the survivability of an animal with a better eyesight that would survive in nature better, and therefore pass along the genes of that particular trait that it has.
Why does an eye care whether it's survivable or not? What does an eye
The eye doesn't care. Nothing cares. The animal survives because it has better eyesight. That seems like a very simple concept.
Right, so why don't we see complex things that come out of nature like eyeballs then? Like quarters, like paper clips, like mouse traps, like pencils. These are very simplistic devices.
We see eyeballs all the time.
Well, yeah, but we don't see other things. And that's those things that like eyeballs are mentioned in the Bible as God actually breathing into man, for example, the breath of life. And we look into the eye of a person, we can see their soul. All right, Jesus said when you look into a man's eyes, you get to see the light of his inner person. So that would make sense from that perspective. But how does it make sense from a materialistic perspective that a starfish emerges some eye port? For what purpose? What does a starfish care about? Does a starfish even think?
The starfish doesn't purposely make itself an eye port. I've never seen a soul. They're invisible, I think. And so I don't know what that is. Materialists would say you can't see souls. We don't believe in souls, not a materialist, but the point being is you can't see it. As far as a starfish, there was a mutation. If you have a mutation, some kind of mutation that allowed light all of a sudden where an animal or some kind of creature could not see, and all of a sudden they just were able to tell the difference between dark and light. And now, because light, you're able to go towards light as opposed to dark. Maybe be able to get food that way, algae. So therefore, animals that had that would therefore stay the light, and the animals that were dark, that don't have that mutation, wouldn't live and wouldn't survive. And then the next step would happen is maybe they can see little points as opposed to just light. They can see points, and now they can get the food better. And that animal would pass on its genes to the next one that would therefore be able to do that.
Okay, so inorganic material thinks, correct?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, now, how do you know there are new solar systems forming right now as we speak?
I just read it, like, actually 2 weeks ago.
You believe everything you read?
No.
Okay, thank you.
But I did believe that.
Okay, and how do you know the tail is actually a functioning tail that you see?
Because I read the study where that came from. Okay. There was a functioning tail.
Keep reading.
Okay.
What are the odds of an amino acid coming about from pure molecular collisions? Do you know?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Okay, if we just took, even in the best situation, controlled lab setting, what are the odds that we can actually synthesize an amino acid that can code for protein? Do you happen to know what that is?
The odds of it?
Yes.
No, I would not know the odds because there's no, in order to have the odds of something, you need to, you don't have enough data to actually have an odds. You can create up a manufacturer.
If I said 1 chance in 10 to the 25th power, would that seem anywhere in realm of possibility?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. And how likely would that be, given the best situation, not an Earth that's a primordial soup, all kinds of toxic gases?
How are you coming up with that number, that odds?
Well, biochemists have calculated that's what it would take. Since it's never been done before, even under the best conditions.
Well, it's never been done before, then the odds would be 0.
Right. Of course, it's never been done before. They're giving a hypothesis based upon theories that have been established. That's approximately that.
It's just a guess. So
how come scientists haven't done it yet?
Because they haven't done a lot of things. How come we haven't traveled to out of the solar system in a spaceship? We haven't done a lot of things.
And you're saying it's a fair equivalence?
Yeah.
That analogy? Okay.
I don't see your odds. I don't know how you come up with
What are the odds of a DNA molecule self-assembling? Do you happen to know?
The odds of a DNA molecule self-assembling.
Right, all by itself, without any intelligence.
How would I put odds to that? What would you put as odds?
Well, like 1 to 10 to the what power? Second power, third power. The chance if you win lottery is 1 to the 10 to the 6th power.
How would you justify any odds being right or wrong in that scenario? What would coming up with that odd?
Because the issue is, again, we see a lot of things that nature is making that you can't explain. It's not making quarters or paper clips or other simple things. Why is only making things the Bible talks about reflect the glory of God, which you keep denying and stealing that glory from Him? Why do you keep doing that, given that the odds show you that this, it's not that it won't happen, it can't happen. The odds are too astronomical for it to happen. Unless you think you can go out tonight, buy 5 lotto tickets and think you can win all 5 lotto tickets. You think you can win all 5 Mega Millions tonight? Good. Or I'm sorry, all the 5, like the Mega Millions, the lotto, you know, all the big lottery things. That's like what it would be equivalent to. Is that possible?
I have trouble trying to understand how you would decipher that something would be impossible and how you're deciphering these odds. I know when you talk about odds of something, I take a deck of cards, it's got 52 cards. The odds of me getting something is 1 out of 52. How are you deciphering 1 out of 10 to the 25th power? How are you deciphering those odds? And so the fact that you're trying to come up with odds with something that doesn't have odds, and just saying, well, it's so impossible, it can't happen. You're just making up.
Are you familiar with the work of William Dembski?
Yes, I've heard of William Dembski.
Okay, are you familiar with the work of other scientists and mathematicians who have written on the remote chances?
You'll have to send me that literature, because I don't see how that is. And then I can refute it. But I don't see how you're just telling me some names of some scientists. And I can tell you some names of scientists that.
Okay, well,
that's not
David
true.
Berlinski, John Lennox, a couple of names that have basically established the mathematical impossibility of you getting a universe from nothing, a solar system from chaos, Earth-Moon system with its fine parameters, and the BIOS that shows incredible complexity to the DNA, the RNA, and amino acids. And if you put it all together, it would be like you winning all the major lotteries. Actually, what was it, over 30 weeks in a row, every single night you win all the major lotteries without exception. Or taking a quarter, having the quarter flip, and you pick heads, and it comes up heads 50,000 times without exception. That's basically what it's like, just so you know. Can that happen? Me flipping a quarter 50,000 times in a row, can it happen?
Yes.
Okay, you heard that, everybody. You heard that.
No, that you could flip a quarter that many times, yes.
I'll ask the question again. Can I flip the quarter and it comes up heads 50,000 times in a row without exception?
Can it happen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course it can.
Did everybody hear that? Basically, it shuts the debate at this point, but we'll continue. Okay, fine.
Are you asking me
I'm
questions?
I'm time for questions. You can ask me questions.
You
Just a chance.
I didn't get to answer any of that. But
all right. Now, you mentioned like the tail supposedly on a baby, which is again an appendage. Those type of appendages here all over. I shot a deer a couple of years ago. I had what appeared to be a tail growing off its front leg. I mean, come on. These are just cancerous, possibly, and other genetic mutations, and it's not going to help the organism. Mutations are always deleterious. And the 0.01% that are neutral. They don't advance any type of macroevolution. But how come we don't see fish gills on people? Have you ever seen fish gills on people?
Fish gills?
Yes.
No.
Thank you. How about any other type of supposed, ontology that we have come out of, this ontogeny rather, supposedly recapitulates phylogeny, which has been debunked, by the way, in utero, that the idea that we have gill slits, we don't have true gill slits, it's been, you understand that, right? You recognize there's no true gill slits in
embryology,
utero?
we have the genes there to do that.
But do you believe that a
genes
fetus,
are there, just because they don't manifest, the genes are still there. Just like legs don't manifest on a whale. The genes to make them are there. Just like chicken don't have teeth. But the genes
to manufacture legs are in a whale?
Yes. In their genome, the genes are there. They're just not active. You have active genes and non-active genes.
You say we didn't come from pond scum. Now what did we come from?
Our parents.
And where did our parents come from?
Their parents.
And where did they come from?
The parents.
Well, let's go beyond that. Let's stop playing games now. Okay, we came
That's
from.
the answer to that question.
No, let's get the brass tacks here. Come on. Where did life start?
So
Where did life start?
13.
God didn't start life. Yes.
Are we debating evolution, or are we debating the beginning of the universe?
Well, you said that my analogy on pond scum was not correct. So where did we come from? If God didn't make us, then where do we ultimately come from?
We came from our parents, which came from the human species. If you want to go there, we came from Homo erectus. That would be the one before us.
Right. Where did Homo erectus come from?
I got to memorize these.
I don't really know
something or other.
Okay.
I forgot.
All right, go back. Okay, go back. When did life start?
So the point being is, if you keep going back, you're gonna eventually.
When did life start?
When did it start?
Right.
They don't know exactly.
You're up here debating.
$4.5 billion million years.
Okay.
No, wait, that's the Earth. That's the age of the Earth.
Okay.
Life, the first cell. I do not know what I'm talking about. I can look it up.
Okay.
But
Well,
it started at some point
3.5 billion.
4.5 and 3.5.
All right. You realize that evolutionists believe it started some premarital soup. The lightning bolt basically synthesized DNA and made the first cell. And so on.
That is a hypothesis.
Right, so you admit that life cannot be explained by any known scientific explanation. Is that correct? The beginning of life, the genesis of life cannot be explained.
No, we have hypotheses. There is not a,
right,
there is
can
not
it
a
be
theory
demonstrated?
as strong as evolution.
Right.
And again, you're talking about abiogenesis, and again, the totally different. Evolution is not the same as abiogenesis. You could say, if you sat here and were asking me questions about the theory of gravity, I would say, what the heck are you talking about right now? Because it's not the same, it's not what we're talking about, it's not what the debate is about. So if you want to talk about the beginning of time and planets, that's not an evolutionary debate.
Okay, so has science proven that you can get life from non-life?
Have they proven it?
Yes.
Science doesn't prove anything. We never prove anything because there's always new evidence. Okay, ready? New evidence of gravity. Okay. Now, one time this might float away.
All right. Has science,
gravity would,
has science given us a basis to believe that it's a credible thought or statement to think that you can get life from non-life? True or false?
There are hypotheses and theories.
Answer the question, yes or no, please.
It's not a yes or no question.
I'm asking you to answer it in yes or no fashion.
But I'm not answering it that way.
Okay. Next question. If I'm a mere animal, then why am I so different from the rest of the animals?
You're not. Do you have eyes like animals? Do you have legs? Do you have a circulatory system?
Okay, next question. All right. Do you recognize any undisputed missing link in the fossil record? Can you give us an example of one undisputed fossil in the fossil record that shows macroevolution of a change from, let's say, an amphibian, okay, to a reptile, or a reptile to a mammal, or a reptile to a bird?
Fossil in the fossil record is a transitional fossil, because everything is one thing that it doesn't. You're not going to have a dinosaur give birth to a bird with feathers. It's going to be a dinosaur gives birth to a dinosaur. That's a little different.
But can you give us one example? Give the audience one example of an undisputed fossil record.
Every fossil that you see is a transitional.
All right, so you admit there aren't any?
No, I didn't. I said every single. I said there's infinite. Every single one of them. I didn't. It's the opposite of what I said.
Can you give us just one example? Just give us one example of an undisputed fossil that shows a true missing link.
You name a fossil, and it's a transitional fossil.
You're saying they're all showing that.
I'll say it for a fourth time. All fossils are transitional. Because it's going from something before to something after.
By the way, you ever seen a transitional fossil for a rose?
No.
How about a horseshoe crab?
Oh wait, transitional fossil for a rose. Yeah.
What is that?
Because if you look at what a rose, what we see as roses we give out on Valentine's Day, versus what a rose is in natural form, we have changed the rose, and by our own, because we like the way it smells and this and that, and we've changed it so every single one in between there, from a natural rose to a rose that you give to someone, is transitions. You can find the transitions, you can show them.
Can you give us one example of evolution happening today in the year 2014?
Yeah, everyone in this room. Every single person in this room is a little bit different than their parents are. They both got DNA from their parents, and they've changed. That's what evolution is. Okay. Change.
If evolution is true, why do I find a need to seek after an imaginary being, according to you, who will hurt my chances of spreading my genes?
I don't understand.
In other words, being a Christian puts a big quash on the sexual drive, so why would that even enter into the human brain if evolution is true? In other words, why would religion be a part of the human conscience if evolution is true?
For most of the religions, a lot of religions want you to have water babies. That's fine. I don't see religion as stopping you from sexually producing.
All right, then. Thank you. Now it's going to be MC Washington's 15-minute cross-examination of Bruce.
I don't have 15 minutes of questions, so I'll ask a couple and then we can cut it short and get to Q&A. All right, so I'm going to keep all of my questions into evolution. So I have my picture up there. On one side are birds, which are like an ostrich, okay? In birds have something, their bone structure is, they have what's called pneumatic bones, right? Which means they have holes in them, which makes them lighter, makes them have the ability to fly, all right? Pneumatic bones also are easier to break because they're hollow. If you ever had a chicken, you know, and you eat chicken from KFC, you break it in half, it's very hollow inside. Right? Mammals have solid bones because they're stronger because they don't need to fly. There's no need for that. Except ostriches. Ostriches don't need to fly, so why do they have pneumatic bones? Why would God give them those bones? And bats do need to fly, and they don't have pneumatic bones. So why not give them pneumatic bones?
Are you asking me to play God?
No, I'm just saying this is what evolution would say would happen. And creation, what is the answer for creationism? Why would that happen, according to creationism?
God made all the creatures according to their kinds, and they operate based upon their design. So if an ostrich has more, by the way, all bones are hollow to some degree. They're not completely, I know what you're saying, but there is this bone marrow, for example, and it's not the same as bone in the human bone. But the point is, if you're going to look at bone structure, it ultimately has a purpose. So ostriches don't need to fly a lot, so they're going to have bones that represent birds at the same time. The other features that will allow it to run. That's just the way God made it.
Ostriches never fly.
I'm not saying that they do fly.
So
they have wings for whatever purposes God gave them wings.
Right.
Or if they are part of the curse, by the way, it could be that they're part of the curse, and that they were supposed to fly but can't. Then that's just part of the curse, and the creation represents the deleterious effects of that curse.
So bats are cursed too, with stronger bones?
No, apparently God made the bats have stronger bones for whatever purpose they are designed for. I don't know bats well enough, and I don't think you do either, to say definitively why they have strong bones.
No, well that's what I'm saying. Evolution would say, because they're mammals, they would have bones that are not pneumatic bones. And evolution would say that all birds have pneumatic bones because it wouldn't change, and even birds, because it made them lighter to fly. So even if they don't need, if you're going to make a bird, if I was going to make a bird, I would say, well, we got to make it light. It seems like a smart thing to do, except for these birds that don't fly.
Okay, but first of all, I'm not insisting that a bat is a bird. It's a flying mammal. No creationist I know would contradict that.
Right.
But you got an additional.
Why not have pneumatic bones?
But you got an additional problem. Where did the mammals come from? Where did the bat come from to begin with? Where did the sonar on the bat come from? Can you explain that from naturalistic processes?
You want me to go back and do the? I will. Here, let me write this down. Find out how sonar works. Again, I do not have every single answer to why every single type of thing would evolve. Again, but my question to you is, what is the answer for creation? Apparently, your answer is, well, that's God done it that way.
Well, God did it that way in the sense that it's not a bird; it's a flying mammal. So, like I said, it's designed for that particular purpose.
But if it needs to fly, it should have pneummatic bones. It would be better.
According to whom? It doesn't fly a lot.
Because flying it would be better to be light to fly, and it's the same thing with birds. And if you don't need, and why would you have pneumatic bones in a bird that never flies? That makes it easier for the bones to break. That's all I'm saying. You know, evolution would say, here's why those things happen.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
The reason why those things happen in evolution is all mammals have solid bones, and all birds have pneumatic bones because of the way they evolved that way. They can't change back. But if you're going to just create a bird, why would you create it with a poor bone structure?
Who are you, old man, to talk back to God? Romans chapter 9.
I'm not talking back to God. I'm talking about evolution and creation.
Explain where the bird came from, then you'll have the justification when you answer the question. Go ahead. Next question.
I have a justification for asking the question because we're in a debate, and that's the part of the debate. All right. So here's another. So again, I know every single question I can ask, you just say, well, I'm not God, so I don't know why this happened. So, but I'm going to ask the questions anyway because this is why evolution is true. For example, evolution would predict that you would find certain animals. In certain places. If God put all the animals on the planet, there would be, you only have, for example, marsupials in Australia, okay? They don't exist. In New Zealand, there's only birds, as far as that goes, so because of the fact of the way they migrated. Why don't we find marsupials all over the planet?
Why are they only found in Australia? Now, evolution would say the reason why is because when Australia was a part of the landmass in Earth, once it separated, whatever was left on Australia went on its own evolutionary track, separate from everything else on the rest of the Earth, because it was on an island. And that's where marsupials came from. But apparently, with creationism, every marsupial was just dropped on Australia for some reason. That's it, and they didn't go anywhere else. We can't have kangaroos anywhere in Latin America. Why is
well, the Bible's silent on why there are kangaroos only in Australia, or birds, as you claim, in New Zealand. However, we know after the flood, as creatures began to repopulate the earth, that in fact there was a shifting of the continents and so on, because the Bible talks about this happening during the flood. There was a shifting of continents, right? And we know that through speciation, we can explain why you have isolated pockets of animals after the flood.
Why don't the marsupials just hightail it to Australia?
That I can't explain to you specifically why they went that direction. However, I can say that
bears only went that
it
way?
does present a big problem for your billions of years and millions of years, because they should be in every continent if it's billions of years.
No, because they're on an island.
Well, no, they can get off the island through various means.
How does kangaroos get off the island?
There's been documented cases of animals traveling thousands of miles on biomass sheets, on ice sheets.
How do the current kangaroos get off Australia?
There's a lot of ways, and plus humans can take them. If you say humans been around,
there
according to
are no
4
ice
million
sheets between
years,
Australia and like China.
if the hominoids have been around 4 million years, they could have built some type of rudimentary boat and taken these creatures, but that's more evidence against your theory. Go ahead.
No, it isn't, because all the marsupials stayed there. So you're saying, well, they could have moved. They didn't. They're all there, in the same place.
More evidence against millions and billions of years.
No,
Next question.
it's not evidence
Okay.
against that. So, what is your definition of a kind?
Well, a created kind would be, for example, the human kind. Right? In Acts 17, that God made one blood or one kind of people. Right? We like to call it races. Those are expressions of the kind, the human kind, the human race. All right, dog kind, cat kind. All right, you have different types of cats. You have cheetahs, leopards. You have house cats. So as long as within a kind, we can allow for variations to show themselves in that sense. Bacteria. You have different types of bacteria. The stuff that made me sick from a couple weeks ago in the restaurant, to E. coli, to stuff that causes sore throats.
How do I separate dog kind from, what is the classification from dog kind to cat kind? How do I separate those two?
Well, there's a separate DNA structure that God put into the dogs.
A species in science, it says a species is created if it cannot mate with another. It can't mate with something else. All right. So, for example, you have ring species of lizards. Okay. So, which means that there's a mountain in California. This species can mate with this species. They make another species here. This one can mate with this one. This one can mate with this one. When they get around, by the time they get around the mountain range, this species can't mate with this species because the genetics have changed so much. So each one can mate with itself, but this one can't mate with that one. And that's called speciation. And so there are different species. So science is very specific about this is how you can tell one species from another. Okay. What is the definition of a kind? Because I would like to know, again, because I have a picture of an animal that kind of looks like a dog, and it kind of looks like a rabbit. How do you differentiate the two? What kind do I stick it into? Rabbit kind or dog kind?
Well, I have to see the particular animal to comment, but I
Would you go by just by the pictures?
Well, we go by the genetics. We have to go by, like you said, can it reproduce with something that it's associated with? We look at its habitat, its behavior, and a lot of different other aspects. However, in general, dogs, like wolves, coyotes, the same kind, right? That we all one family, one kind.
So wolves and dogs are the same kind?
Basically, yeah. We come from the same basic ancestor. We have no problem with that. But like on Noah's Ark, you probably have, let's say, it looked like half a coyote, half a wolf, half a dog. And then today, all those dogs came from those
So a wolf and a dog is the same kind. What about, so is it just because of the teeth? What classification? Because I need to be able to say.
The Bible and science doesn't say, even you admit that science can't say other than what we can do from breeding. So
if I want to say this is a cat kind, if you're going to say something is a kind and you're going to say there are different kinds, what is the classification? What do you, like I just told you, a species it's a different species if this. For a kind, this is a different kind from this. If this is the criteria, what is the criteria for a kind? Don't tell me a bunch of different kinds. I want to know what the criteria is for a kind.
Again, whether it can mate, whether it behaves the same way, whether it looks basically the same.
Okay, so looks basically the same. Because I can send you some animals that look basically the same, okay? And you would look at them and say, well, they might be the same kind, and they are genetically completely different. You have a dolphin, you have a shark, and you have a fish. They are completely different species, completely different anatomies, and you might look at them and say, well, they're all kind of the same kind. They're fishes. They swim in the water and they have fins, so they're all the same kind.
No, a dolphin is a marine mammal. I never said it was the same thing.
Well, that's what. But how do you differentiate the three?
Well, like I said, give me the particular animal, and I can give you the characteristics, but it's not helping your cause to do this. But.
No, because you can have it. If you have a straight definition of here's what a kind is, then we can falsify it. There is no falsification for kind.
Yes, there is.
What is it?
They can't mate. They can't mate. You already mentioned.
So just mating. So if two things can't mate,
similar behavior,
dogs,
similar diet, similar place where they live.
Right. So I want to, because I've never had somebody actually tell me all the criteria.
Flora they need to survive. It's a lot of things, but I need to know the specific organism. It's not showing anything from your side. It shows everything from my side. These things are particularly
Chihuahuas cannot mate with Great Danes.
Right. Explain mating from an atheistic point of view. Explain it. How does sexual reproduction even happen? Why would you do sexual reproduction?
Don't change the subject. Great Danes and Shih Tzus cannot mate. So are they the same kind?
Okay, but all right, granted, I understand your point. Maybe there is at a point they can no longer mate, but they're in the same kind because of deleterious effects in the genome. Granted, we know that we're in a cursed world. Because we're in a cursed world, everything is becoming more and more disorganized, more and more susceptible to cancer, sickle cell anemia, and these type of mutations that are bad and driving things backward instead of forward. And that's more proof against your theory.
You gave up enough there. I'll let you go off. I'll let you off the comments. All right, so we say that something can't, I love the phrase all the time that something can't come from nothing. I have a personality and a conscious. Didn't exist before me. Is that something coming from nothing?
No, it came from God. And God has the eternal personality, eternal consciousness.
So my consciousness is God's consciousness?
No, it's not. It's made in His image.
So where was it before it was here?
He's always been.
No,
He's always been created.
My consciousness.
In the mind of God.
So it came from the mind, so it didn't come from nothing?
No.
It existed before
God is someone.
So is it the same now?
Is it the same?
All I'm saying is my consciousness, if it's different than what it was before, it came from nothing. No. There wasn't any consciousness in my body.
Everything that you see. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Is this your question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Everything you see, everything that exists, came out of the mind of God. All right. So the mind of God is eternally creating at least new thoughts between the mind of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. If not new worlds, if not new galaxies, and so on. But nonetheless, emerges from His own mind, and you're a reflection of His mind. You have rationality because God is rational. Your muscle moves, your heart beats, your brain works because the designer has put that design inside of you, and it's manifesting itself, and that's why He needs to be glorified and thanked for it.
So, before I became conscious, I was just part of God.
Yes.
And then, when I became conscious, I'm not a part of God?
You're a part of God in the sense that the molecules and atoms that your body is made up of and your mind is made up of.
Mind has no atoms or.
No, you don't let me finish. Cut me off.
Okay.
Your mind is actually some type of essence, whether it's you want to put it on an energy level, like light, for example. How we can't necessarily put it in some type of qualifying category at this point. However, we do know it's there because I hear you speaking. I don't see your mind, but I know your mind is working because it's animating your tongue and making sounds. So your soul or your mind is there because God actually created it, and you have a choice to make with it to either obey Him or not obey Him, to recognize His creation or to not recognize it.
I only have a couple of seconds. So I just want to, like all that you just said, like, oh, you were part of God. This is just assertions. You understand that? Like you're asserting that. You're just saying that. But there was nothing before me as far as my consciousness did not exist. Okay, it came into existence when I started. You're asserting it was with God, but you don't have any proof of that. It was as far as when you say, well, something can't come from nothing. I would point to that as an example of something coming from nothing. You asserting that God, just like saying God created the universe, well, the universe did begin, but you're asserting that God was the beginning. It could have been a multiverse. It could be, again, the false dichotomy. Well, if you don't have the answer, if you don't know what happened before the universe started, then my answer is correct, and that is a logical fallacy that's not true. All right, we're done.
Okay.
Alrighty then. We're going to start with our closing statements. Bruce is going to go first. 10 minutes.
I'm glad in God's providence that Matthew had just said that, because he admitted essentially to the absolute dire situation that the materialist is in, and that he's groping for the proverbial zero concept, the proverbial you can get something from nothing idea. This, of course, is absurdity. And any worldview, any belief system that maintains that you can have morality, purpose and meaning, language, mathematics, beauty, the creation itself, apart from God, is absurd. Romans chapter 1 tells us that the world is suppressing the truth in unrighteousness. Suppressing what truth? The truth of God being the creator. That he has created everything, including ourselves, including our minds. And when you do this, you end up denying reality. You live in a false world. You live in an illusory world. And this, unfortunately, is what Matthew has chosen to live in. And those who are consistent in the evolutionary point of view in denying God, and that's where it leads to, a denial of God, a suppression of God, all right? Because we know that his eternal attributes, his divine nature, have been clearly understood by us seeing what has been made. When I see a human being walking, when I see a container of water, when I see the stars in the night sky, that's proof right there. That is evidence right there that there is a God who is eternal. When I marry that to the question of why am I here? Who am I? What is my purpose? What is my destiny? And I recognize that there is no purpose, there is no destiny outside of God, and God is calling me to love him, to know him, to worship him, then I realize, in fact, that creation is not just scientifically more tenable and the better explanatory model for all that there is, but I recognize that's the very answer for these key questions of who I am, why I'm here, where I'm going. It's the only sufficient worldview. And in fact, the Bible goes even further and tells us that when this worldview is rejected, what is adopted in its absence? Sexual licentiousness. Like many of Darwin's followers said, hey, now we can do what we want sexually. Now we can go out and, we have our excuse to do what we just want to eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. I'm just, after all, a bag of pond scum. I'm just a bag of cytoplasm. Accidentally arranged, accidentally going to be unarranged. Might as well get all I can out of this life. And a lot of damage has come out of it. Pol Pot, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Hitler. In the millions, people have been murdered under the guise of materialism, under the guise of naturalism, under the guise of egalitarianism. Let's just all share our stuff because you only get one chance at this, and let's just get our gusto now. That's where this leads to. It is folly at the end of the day. Not one scientific evidence was brought to the table tonight, but I gave you many scientific evidences, starting with mathematics. You cannot get the complexity of the universe, the solar system. My opponent says those are not fair. They're very fair. Where did the evolution of the universe come from? Where did the evolution of the solar system come from? Where did the evolution of the Earth-Moon system come from? These are very fair questions. He just bats them away like they're not part of evolution. They're very much part of evolution. Because they love to say, the atheists, that we're stardust. Well, really? They haven't even seen a star being formed. They claim that they're being formed. All right? Among other claims that were made tonight that just have nothing behind them. You can go research them on your own. People do not have functioning tails. Okay, whales do not have vestigial pelvic bones showing that they came about from a cow hanging out by the water. These things all have valid purposes and valid uses, just like your tonsils and appendix have valid purposes and uses. The Creator gave us plenty of evidence as to his being, as to his design. The mathematics are there, the science is there. There's not one fossil in the fossil record that shows any type of transition. When you had Noah's flood, what did you have? You had all of the living organisms, all of that which was alive was crushed. That's why you have coal and oil. That's why you have fossil fuels. is because all the living matter was crushed and made, all right, into very convenient areas of oil, coal, and other natural gas pockets, means of us now using that for what? Gas motors and you know, jet engines and so on. We understand that the worldwide flood is a much better explanation of the Grand Canyon than some slow meandering of the Colorado River just eking away at these sediments. It just doesn't make sense. You have polystriated fossils, you got trees that go through multiple layers of rock. One layer of rock down here supposedly is 300 million years old. You go up here and you have supposedly 10 million years old, and yet the same tree is going through it. How does that work? All right, it doesn't work. It, again, shows you the impossibility, all right, of taking this idea of billions of years, millions of years, and then somehow getting this mythical idea of, well, here, look, this is where the jellyfish came about, the Cambrian explosion. Well, the Cambrian explosion shows, yeah, jellyfish and trilobites and horseshoe crabs and starfish, and there's absolutely not one ancestor. You know, 450 million years ago, all of a sudden, boom, they just popped up out of nowhere. Well, where did they come from? All you hear is silence on the other side. Where did the first cell come from? All you hear is silence on the other side. They say they have it all figured out. They haven't figured out how to solve cancer. They haven't solved, you know, AIDS, how to actually cure it. They haven't solved even a common cold, and they think they can tell us that we came from a primate-like ancestor, you know, 3.5 million years ago in the plains of East Africa. Australopithecus afarensis. I mean, come on, what is going on here? Australopithecus afarensis, aka Lucy, was 35% of a skeleton over hundreds of yards, put together with a lot of poetic license. And again, it's still disputed within the evolutionary community as to whether it's actually a true transition from primate-like ancestors, primates basically, let's not fudging here, because that's ultimately what we came from according to the evolutionary side, and ultimately, if you go far enough back, pond scum, very much so. Let's not escape that reality. That's ultimately, we're just glorified pond scum. We're just a bunch of accidents here according to evolution. If you believe that, then you're buying into the same absurdity as what's being purported as science. It's not science. Science is something that's testable, repeatable, and verifiable in a laboratory. Science is taking a quarter and saying, yes, we know how the quarter came about because it shows design. It's a very simple piece of metal. You're simple in terms of what you're made of, mostly carbon. Well, guess what? You give billions of years to the Earth, it can't make a quarter, but it can make brains, eyes, and ears out of carbon? Come on. You really think I'm going to believe that one? When the chances, and they've done the mathematics, whether it be John Lennox, whether it be Dembski, whether it be Berlinski, it doesn't matter what expert mathematician you're talking about, they have proven that it's mathematically impossible to get a universe out of nothing, to get a solar system randomly from random molecular collisions, to get living forms that are so complex. Darwin didn't know how complex they are. If he knew how complex a simple cell was, if he knew how complex even an amino acid, a protein rather, is, he never would have published his book, Origin of Species. He never would have done it. He simply would have put his manuscript away and tried to find more butterflies in his garden. He was a great nature enthusiast, but he was not a trained scientist. And you don't see actual science in evolution. You see conjecture. You see impositions of ideas like, why would God do this? Even my opponent admitted that tonight himself. Why would God create a bat that's got thicker bones? Ask God. I don't know, but there's a reason for it. It's not a bird anyway, it's a mammal that flies. God likes to do a lot of cool things. That's a kind of cool to look at, right? So at the end of the day, I can't answer those questions, but how dare you talk back to God and say, why would you make it something like this? Tell me how it was made if you're so smart and you can explain it apart from God. They can. And the more we know about science, the more unlikely it is that naturalistic explanations can come up with DNA, RNA, left-handed, not right-handed amino acids, left-handed amino acids. In biochemistry, it's very, very important to be assembled in a complex way that, again, the code of the simplest cell is like Encyclopedia Britannica is to this high. You want to talk about cells in our own body, then you talk about, we'll go way above the ceiling, each cell. You have trillions of cells in your body that work in perfect synchronicity. It's not that it won't happen, it can't happen. This can happen, it's impossible. It's the myth of evolution. It's a bad theory, it's a bad worldview, it's a bad religion. It really is, and it's shed a lot of blood, it's caused a lot of harm to both individuals who make people want to commit suicide. And I'll bet you dimes and donuts that Robin Williams was an evolutionist. I'll go out and say that. I bet you there was some evolution going on there to help him along in his decision to commit suicide. If I'm wrong, forgive me, but that's just my guess. But evolution seems to kick the can a little bit along the road of people rejecting God, rejecting ultimately themselves, any purpose and meaning to life. Because after all, if I'm just an accent, why not just become another accent? Put the old gun to the head and it's done. That, ladies and gentlemen, is insanity, it's absurdity, and that is what the other side is proposing.
Thank you. After this 10-minute closing statement, we're going to have a 7 to 10 minute break. There's food in the back, and we're going to ask you guys for your questions. Make sure you put the name of who you're referring the question to on the piece of paper.
I have questions. Awesome. I will say there's so much, as I said in the beginning, there's so much that was just thrown at you. Not only did we not even stick to evolution, we went all the way back to Big Bang Theory, 13 billion years, and you need to know it all in order to answer these questions. I'm going to go back to some of the things that were said. First of all, the odds factor, I do want to say again that you cannot create these odds, you're just making it up. The fact that something exists there's no odd. If something exists, the odds of it happening are 1. It has to happen. It happened. The same, and just because we make it as special, like eyes, we think eyes are special because we have eyes. Something without eyes doesn't think eyes are special anymore. Humans think eyes are special because we like ourselves, we're ego. As far as, I'm going to just give a very brief thing to evolution leads to killing and murder and all that kind of stuff. If I sat here and said, by the way, and I pulled out the Bible and started finding parts of the Bible and said, this says I can kill people, this says I can kill people, this says I can do slavery, your reaction would be, well, you're misinterpreting the Bible, or that's not what it's claiming, and you're taking the Bible and then making it something that you want to do and then using it as justification. So if that's an okay answer for why, if I said that about the Bible, why do you sit there and say, well, evolution, which just basically says, doesn't say go and kill things, it doesn't say, it says this is what happens and here's why it happens. If you want to take that and say, well, now I can go kill people, then that's not evolution telling you. Show me the line in evolution says, please go kill other people who are weaker than you. I don't know where it says that. So your interpretation of how you do things is up to you. So that's a non-sequitur. As far as, he threw out a lot of things there right at the end, like trees, going through different layers of rock. I have videos on my website explaining how that works. These are all explained things. As far as he went through a whole bunch of things that science hasn't fixed. We haven't fixed cancer, haven't fixed AIDS. How many people have died from smallpox lately? Anyone have someone dying from smallpox? We dump in ice water for measles and the black pit plague and all the other things that we have cured with science. Okay, so just because science hasn't cured everything doesn't mean that we're ongoing. Magic Johnson's still alive. He had HIV like 20 years ago. All right, so taking drugs and they're getting better at curing things. Yeah, science doesn't have all the answers, but it continues to search for the answers. The fact that Darwin was a Christian, right? Kepler, Galileo, these were all Christians, all right? So they all get a lot of scientists came from Christianity. So the fact that they took so why would they be against Christianity? Like, why would they have theories, about how the universe works? It hurt Darwin that he was like, wow. He looked and said, you know what? If this is true, it's horrible for Christianity. He went through a long part of his life where he didn't want to talk about this theory because of the fact that he was a Christian and he was like, this is against Christianity. And finally, later on, he decided that he wasn't going to be a Christian anymore. So, but the point being is these sciences go on throughout. It doesn't matter what we believe. And all I ask is, if you're going to, these arguments that were said today, I've heard them all. I have videos already explaining them. They're already, they're the same arguments, they're the same creationist things recycle over and over and over again. And all I ask is if you're going to
I would never attack the Bible. You know, when they talk about, and by the way, I do want to say, as far as atheists go, an atheist is someone who does not believe in God. It's not a materialist. There's a difference between somebody who is a materialist and somebody who's an atheist. It's a completely different thing. And I am not a materialist. I'm not going to go through my beliefs at this moment. If you want to ask me later, you're more than welcome to. However, the point being is, if you're going to argue against evolution, then it is your point. It is your responsibility to learn the actual what evolution is. The reason I'm at this church tonight is because I like to test my beliefs. I like to hear things that are new and see. You know, that's why my beliefs I feel are very strong, because I've tested them and I've changed my beliefs when I find something wrong. But nothing here tonight has said. I haven't heard anything that has explained. All I've heard is, well, that's the way God did it, and that's not. that's an easy way to not do anything. Why bother trying to do any kind of science or figure anything out? Just say that's the way God did it. So I would ask, if you're going to debate about evolution, or if you're going to talk to evolution, or you're going to talk to an atheist, that you at least find out what it is that they believe or what the theories are before you start talking about other things and trying to debate against them. It would be like me trying to tell you that the Bible was wrong and not reading the Bible, or not even, if I sat here and said, well, the Bible's not right because, you know, Jesus Christ was shooting people with M16s. It says it in the Bible somewhere. You'd be like, what are you talking about? No, you didn't. And I'd be like, no, yeah, I did. And then if you show me, I read it somewhere there once, and I didn't know what I was talking about. That's how I feel sometimes when I talk to people about evolution, because they don't take the time to learn about evolution, what it actually states, what it is, the theory of evolution, and then they want to be adamant about why it's wrong. How can you prove something wrong if you don't even know what it says? I don't understand how that works. So, on that note, that's all I got. I don't need 10 minutes. That's all I have. But I do thank everyone for coming down, and I also am looking forward to questions.
All right, thank you. So we're going to have a break, and then we're going to get to the questions.
In order. Those in order. And then these are all from that. That's the only ones for me, so we can only have two. It's in order. Okay. Just do one at a time.
Alrighty then. So we're going to have a couple questions, and the first one is going to be to Bruce. And then we have 2 minutes to explain.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 minutes to explain and 1 minute to rebuttal.
2 minutes for the person getting the question, 1 minute for the other person to rebut.
Great. Bruce, if all things are created, who created God?
Okay, God is eternal. In fact, God's name Yahweh means I am. It just simply means He has always been there. He's always been creating. Trinity, at least new thoughts between the mind of the members of the Trinity. But possibly even new universes, new stars, new solar systems, who knows. But He's always been creating. This is one of infinite creations from the mind of God. He's always been there. God is eternal, not the universe. My opponent would have to assert, if he's to be logically consistent, that the universe is eternal if he rejects God. But we know as a scientific fact that the universe is not eternal. That's the first of his many problems with his belief system.
He might be talking about the belief system of a materialist, not my belief system, because we haven't gone through that, and I do want to make sure that is a point that's really important. Atheism doesn't tell you anything other than that you do not believe in God. It does not tell you what your belief system actually is. However, going to that question, again, that's just an assertion. It's like, well, he's asserting that God's eternal, and we don't actually assert that the universe is eternal. We say we don't know what happened. Science is not interested in assertions, or you can make a hypothesis, but if you don't have anything to back it up, then they're not going to go any further. So we don't know. We can only tell you up to Planck time, since that time, what's been happening. That's the only thing. Before that, we have nothing. Science has nothing to say.
Okay. To MC Washington, if there is no God, why is mass murder wrong?
If there is no God, why is mass murder wrong? Because we want to live in a community. We want to live. If I have to fear that somebody's going to kill me at any time, not even mass murder, any murder. If I have to fear that, then I would not. It would be beneficial to me to not want to kill somebody, and also for them not to want to kill me, for me to feel safe.
If there was no trust, like people as where morality came from, I guess that might be where that question is going. As a species, it is better for us to cooperate and act in groups. We know that's better. So if you lie, okay, which is it's something that would be immoral, where morality came from, you detriment your group because now the group can't trust you, and so therefore we saw lying as a bad thing. If you're killing people, murdering them in their sleep, we don't want you a part of our group. That's kind of how it goes. And if you don't think people like to group up, look at sports, look at schools. You go inside the school and there's this clique and that clique, and we hate each other but then when we fight against the rival school, it's all us versus all them. And then it's New York State great versus New Jersey, and then America is awesome, and the other countries. I mean, if some aliens came, that's probably the best thing for humankind, so that we can be against them because we like to group up, and so we don't want to kill each other because it would be bad for our group, our survivability.
That's a very 21st century middle-class American answer, to be quite frank with you. In most of history and in a third world context especially, or certainly in agrarian context before 1850, just about every nation on earth was primarily agrarian and rural and like that. And that question is basically, the way he was answering it is very more appropriate because my opponent's answer would not actually hit on the real issue. And the real issue is we aren't so much dependent on groups as we are on raw power. That's why you had monarchies down in agrarian times, all right? And raw power is very much, as Machiavelli talked about, the raw driving force of a government that'll have total control. And to have total control, it's just that. I have the power, you don't, and if I have the guns, you don't have the power, I got the power. Survival of the fittest, that is, after all, one of the adages of the whole Darwinian framework. And if I have the power to subdue you, to enslave you, to put you in a number of different situations that you may not agree with, well, tough. I know better than you, it's Big Brother, okay, you're the peon, you're the servant, the subject, okay, and you are the one who has to actually give in. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a minute on this? Yeah. I thought it was my question for me. So, in fact, that answer is poor and does not do historical justice by any means, because history proves the opposite.
And this one goes to Bruce.
Just poke yourself.
If the development of life can be explained in complete naturalistical terms, does that compel us to conclude there is no God?
Everybody hear that?
Yeah.
I barely heard. I'm
If the development of life can be explained in completely materialistical terms, does that compel us to conclude that there is no God?
Okay, if life can be described in completely materialistic terms, would that tell us that there's no God? It depends what your definition of life is. If it's physical life, obviously you can cut open my arm and see material aspects, right, to my arm. My arm is alive. It's a living thing. In that sense, we are not going to say, oh, I'm looking at God, or dismiss God because of some idea of just reducing an analysis of a material object like a hand or an arm. With that said, we have to understand that when I'm looking at an arm, I have to account for why there is an arm. I have to account for where it came from. I have to account for its design. I have to account for it functioning. And that can't be accounted for in a purely evolutionary point of view, where it's naturalism, materialism, random molecular collisions, or chance or luck that is simply driving the supposed assemblage of an arm and the operation of an arm. Because my arm contradicts evolution, so does yours. It has a design, it has a purpose. All right, it's fearfully and wonderfully made, as is every other thing that is out there, but especially the human body. So, at the end of the day, you can't account for anything that is alive or that is present because of the finely tuned parameters. We're talking about thousands of them, whether it be gravity, the mass of a neutron, whether it be the solar system. Again, all these things. Then we have the larger questions of life: morality, aesthetics, okay, justice. All right. Again, mass murder is not wrong in my opponent's worldview. It's actually right, because why? We're just a bag of molecules, and bags of molecules don't have to go by rules. We just go by who's better mutated, who's got the better mutations. I'm a better shot than you. I got the money. I got the power. I rule over you. Done deal. My genes rule. Yours don't. And if you don't like it, there's a bullet in your head. All right. No justice. There's no punishment. There's no afterlife. And that's an absurd world. That's where this leads.
Your 1 minute rebuttal.
That is. I don't understand how Bruce is able to tell me what my thoughts and feelings are better than I do. This happens a lot when I talk to people, especially when I talk to believers. You can't tell me what my worldview is based on evolution. Evolution, I gave you the definitions, and again, just to continue asserting it, no matter how many times he wants to assert it, to just keep saying, well, this is what this leads to. Evolution is a theory, evolutionary theory. Things evolve, they change over time, and evolutionary theory explains why they change over time. Does not justify murder or killing or anything like that. That's not a part of the theory, and if you want to take it that way, you are more than welcome to, and we will exclude you from the group. But as far as that goes, that is not anything in evolution that says you kill other things.
Next question is for Matthew. Are you content knowing you came from nothing?
I didn't come from nothing. I came from my parents. That's a very easy concept.
Okay, right, I had 2 questions. All right, we'll just go to the next question.
I mean, if you want to say that my consciousness came from nothing, I'll go with that. But apparently that came from God. So, yeah, I don't know what's left. There was a sperm, there was an egg, and then they came together, made a zygote, and now I have 1 trillion cells. And it's a growth process. I was not made, I was not created, I grew. Just like everything we see on this planet. Things are not created, they grow. And they change and they evolve over time. That's what we see.
Just because of time, we'll ask another question. Explain the origin of the dinosaur.
The origin of the dinosaur?
Yeah.
There were, I go back to my hand and the wrist analogy that I used before, okay? Because we try, for us as humans, everything is all one. We're all made out of molecules and atoms and all that kind of stuff. It just takes different forms. And so it's easier for us, though, to say this is a table and this is a phone and this is because it looks different, but they're all made up of atoms. They're all made up of the same stuff. They just take different forms. So when you're saying, well, what is the difference between, and that's why I asked you, what's the difference, where does your hand start and your wrist? There is no such thing as a hand and a wrist in real life. That's just us making a definition so we can communicate with each other. But we sometimes take the definitions we give to things and then think that that's really the thing. That's not the thing. It's just our classification of it. So a dinosaur, you would have to, we say this is what a dinosaur is. So before, where did it come from? It came from whatever was before that we decided it was different enough that we finally called it something different. We gave it a different name because it looked different enough. It's like a Shih Tzu and a Great Dane. They kind of look the same as their dogs, but they don't look like cats, so those are cats. That's how it goes.
So yeah, the origin of the dinosaur, Bruce?
Well, again, it's of such enormity. It's of such incredible design. You go into the New York City Museum of Natural History and you see these skeletons, which a lot of those are by like plaster Paris. A lot of fill-ins there, but nonetheless, you get to see the picture. It's just incredible how much handiwork was put into the dinosaur, and yet the evolutionist, the naturalist, can't even tell us where one vertebrae came from. Not to mention the dozens of vertebrae it takes to make one backbone for a dinosaur, and the muscles that would have to go along with that, and then the heart that would have to pump the blood through that creature, and so on. He's talking about enormous energy dimensions that you can't explain through naturalistic processes. It just can't be done. Again, another beautiful testimony of God's power.
Okay, next question is for Bruce. What makes the Bible a more credible source of information than science?
Well, ultimately, the Bible is going to give us true science, which is the undefiled Word of God. Okay, so science means knowledge, and one huge problem that the evolutionists have brought into their own camp on their own heads is the fact that they will not tolerate any opposition. I want to applaud Matthew for coming here tonight. I really applaud him for even making an attempt to try to defend his worldview. He should be applauded for that, because it's usually not the case. Usually evolutionists will just, run and hide. They don't want to be confronted, and they just, will do anything. And of course, they hijack the educational system. We've allowed it, by the way. The church has allowed it to our own detriment. But they just force feed and brainwash children with inaccurate pictures. I can open up my global studies textbook and see Australopithecus afarensis dressed up as some type of caveman. I mean, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it's just unbelievable what's happening. But at the end of the day, this is what you're looking at. You're looking at a complete attack against the Word of God. And the Word of God is truth, period. It is true knowledge, period. It stands on its own, period. Is it a science textbook in the sense of a physics book, a biology book, and breaking down science in those categories? No, it's not. But it's interesting because all those categories that are objectively understood actually do show what? That the Word of God, as it already proclaims to be, it's self-authenticating truth, that it actually backs up what the true biological sciences and physical sciences, okay, whether it be chemistry or physics, astrophysics, cosmogony, and so on, actually show us. That's the interesting thing about it. All right, but in fact, the Bible is the truth, all right, and it actually is self-authenticating. We know that because of all of its profundity, the prophecies that came to pass, the miraculous nature, how all the millions of lives that have been changed through it, okay, etc. But ultimately, the Bible is the only undefiled truth we have.
And your 1 minute rebuttal.
What was this question again? About the Bible. I just have to say, what was the question again?
Yeah, I put it there. Is the scriptures?
Is the scriptures? Can we rely on that more than science? The Bible more than science?
As far as well, let me just talk about what Bruce just said. First of all, evolutionists don't want it. It's very hard to find an evolutionary scientist. Evolutionary scientist is not really, like I told you, scientists do fields of work, and evolution is the theory that ties it all together. There's not people going out and saying, well, I'm going to study evolution. They study giraffes, they study genetics, they study whatever, and then evolution is just the unifying theory of those things. And the reason why scientists don't want to debate this stuff is because of what happened today. If I came in here and I had credentials of being the #1 geneticist in the world, I have to sit around and talk about abiogenesis and Big Bang theory, and that's not their area of expertise. So the point being is it's such a big thing and you could go anywhere. It's easier to ask a question and then just make an assertion than it is to actually come up and show the scientific and teach you here's why we say what we're saying. It's harder to teach than to ask the question. That's how it is.
Okay. Next question is to Matt. This one's more for just personal opinion. Would you rather live believing in God and die to find out there isn't a God, or not believing in God and die to find out there is a God?
What I'd rather do?
Yeah, which one would you rather?
Let's go Pascal's wager again. Here's the.
Would you rather believe?
Would you rather believe?
It is Pascal's wager.
Yeah, Pascal's wager. I'm trying to. There's so many ways to answer it. Would I rather find out? I wouldn't want to die. If I died and I found that there was a God, first of all, he would know. I would ask him. You knew all the things that you needed to, that I needed to be convinced of your existence. So why didn't you show those things to me? That would be my question as far as that goes. So, but saying that being said, if the God that Christians believe in, the fact that I don't believe in him to then be damned to hellfire forever doesn't seem like in his characteristics. So I don't think. So I think I'd be forgiven anyway. But I'm not really worried about it.
Your rebuttal, Bruce?
Well, again, it's self-evident that God exists, so it's not even an issue. Matt's just trying to deny it as politely as he can. The problem is, ultimately, it doesn't end up being polite. It's an attack against the God of the universe. It's an attack against us. Now we forgive, we love, we pray for those who take this position, and we do for Matt, and we respect the fact that he's here tonight wanting to defend his view, but we again call him to repentance. We call him to admit what he knows is true. And the very fact that someone would even ask the question already gives you the answer. Okay, someone says, "Oh, Mr. Bennett, why do you believe in God so much?" Okay, what happens when you die and you find that there is no God? Well, right there, the kid is showing the implausibility, the impossibility of atheism, because he knows that there is an afterlife. And by the way, it's been proven. NDEs, OBEs already give good scientific, materialistic proof for that.
Okay, next question is to Bruce. How old do you think the Earth is? Many Christians believe that Earth is 6,000 years old. It may not be accurate. Can you give us an accurate number from the account of Genesis?
Well, since the Bible is the only absolute truth we have, and science is an ongoing endeavor, I agree with Matt on that point. It's an ever-increasing entity of knowledge. And known science, real science, actually comports with what the Bible tells us, that in fact creation is the true point of view. At the same time, the Bible doesn't give us a chronometer. It doesn't give us a definite age for how old the Earth is. It doesn't tell us how old the universe is, and so on. So there we have to draw pause, and we have to be careful that we do not come up with dates and then set a whole chronology based upon, for example, genealogy. The Apostle Paul warned us not to get into genealogical discussions and disputes and so on, because the genealogies were not made to make a chronometer, to make a strict chronology as to the age of the earth or the universe, etc. So it's something that we just don't know. We don't know how old the world is. There could be a gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, for example. In the beginning, God created, and then He did the 6 days. We do know it was 6 days. That we do know. It was 6 solar days. We do know that. And those 6 days were 24-hour days. All right, but how old ultimately we don't know. I tend to believe it's somewhere maybe around 10,000 years, something like that. But that is just my opinion.
And 1 minute rebuttal.
That was interesting. So I guess, according to the Bible, it could be 4.5 billion years old, and so that would be okay then. And there are, by the way, scientists who are Christians, and they find ways to justify these things, and so therefore, the age of the Earth could be what science says the age of the Earth is. Again, science says things, and that's why the difference between what science is and what a religion is science is not beholden to anything. Everything could change. If what we find in the natural world changes, then we will change what we think about the natural world. That's why the word theory is out there, and we don't use a proof. Proof is in mathematics. So the point being is that in mathematics, 2 plus 2 equals 4, because we have defined what 2 is and what 2 is and what 4 is and what equal and what plus is, and it can't be anything else. In science, we're looking at the natural world, and it could change. We're not locked into, it has to be what we say right now, and that's what religion says, and so I guess the world could be 4.5 billion years old.
Okay. The next question is for you, MC. All right, Matt. How did the sun evolve? Where did the first cell come from? So, like, explain the evolution of the sun.
The sun and the cell?
And the cell, first cell.
I'm going to direct you to History Channel, Universe. We'll tell you about how suns work, and how stars. Again, I wouldn't do it justice. It's an accretion disk. It spins. There's gravity, and voila. So that's my short answer. I'm not an astronomer. But if you want to look into those things, same thing with the cell. The first cell, again, abiogenesis is, there are different theories of abiogenesis and how it happened. It's not necessarily a lightning bolt or something along the lines, but this is, again, science. I would have to actually look it up, read it to you, and research it. And this is, by the way, the reason why I'm doing this debate today, and the reason I even know half the stuff that I know is because I had questions like that, and I'll go look it up. And I wrote down a bunch of things that I'll look up today, and that's probably one I actually know, I've seen how the sons are made, but I wouldn't do it justice trying to explain it to you. But there are lots and lots of YouTube videos and things that can help answer that.
The evolution of the sun, Bruce?
Yeah, well, YouTube videos go both ways, so make sure you've seen the creation YouTube videos also on that. Just want to comment again on the age of the Earth question. You know, I'm not hedging from that in the sense that I am a young Earther. I believe in basically a 10,000-year-old Earth approximately. I think that that's the general idea that the Bible gives, but the Bible again doesn't give us a definite. Okay, and again, I'm affirming a 6 literal day creation. Absolutely, the Bible's clear on that because it marries Genesis 1 and 2 to Exodus 30 that God created 6 days and rested on the 7th. So that we must uphold and affirm. Okay, I'm just all simply saying that the absolute age of the universe, especially the solar system, and even the Earth, again, we should be dogmatic on, that's all. Let me just clarify that. But again, no one's seen a sun being formed, no one's seen a star being formed. I've researched that quite in depth, and I know they claim it, and yes, you can look at the YouTube, and you look at the pictures, you're like, where's the proof? And I don't see it, because the other explanations are far better from what they're claiming.
We're almost running out of questions, Professor Bruce. This is off topic, but it's very important. What is the gospel? What would you say the gospel is?
Well, the gospel is God. God is the good news, and we're the bad news because we all sinned against Him, we all rejected Him, and because of our hatred towards Him, we end up making crazy ideas like we came about from, you know, pond scum over billions of years through random molecular collisions and mutations, and that's what made an eyeball, and that's what made a brain, and so on. So we come up with these incredibly ludicrous ideas to try to justify our wickedness. And really that's what drives evolution, is its justification to go out and, you know, hey, eat, drink, and be merry. You know, thugging, drugging, pimping a horn, why not? I'm just an animal, let's go for it. All right, and hey, I can get a group that'll insulate me, and I'll hang out with that group. You know, our AK-47s, our M16s work just good, you know. So, whether it's or in the agrarian world, I just hook up with a king and just serve the king and let the king rule over me. But ultimately, the gospel is to address the need of man, which is we're separated from God. It's that simple. And until we get that redemption, until we have our hearts changed by God's grace, through faith and repentance in Christ, and of course Christ is eternal God. He's the eternal Son. Right? He's the second person of the Trinity who took on human nature to live the perfect life, to be the perfect sacrifice for our sin. So our sins could be dealt with on the cross. They could actually be dealt with in a way that God's wrath can be satisfied. His justice can be appeased. And if we repent of our sin, Jesus has taken that sin away on the cross, and we can receive forgiveness and receive a reconciled relationship back to our Creator, in which we can know Him. And by knowing Him, we can glorify Him and enjoy Him and love Him and serve Him. And the good news just continues. Why? Because as you grow in Christ's likeness, the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, can abound more and more as we abide more in Christ. So God is the gospel, and the best view of God is the person of His Son, Jesus Christ, who took on humanity, right, to become our Savior, our Lord. If we'll bow our knee to Him, we'll find eternal life.
Okay. Question for Matt. What is our purpose if evolution is true in life? What's our
Whatever
purpose?
you define your purpose to be. You know, as far as a purpose goes, I do want to, just because Bruce keeps saying that, I want to keep saying that evolution is a theory. It is an explanation of why things change over time. It is not a worldview. It is not a directive to go kill people or get AK-47s. That's, again, it's the fact that that's reiterated over and over and over again. I just need to make sure I continue to reiterate that that is not what a scientific theory is. That it would be like reading the theory of gravity and going, well, this, you know, if things fall, then I can kill people. It's not true. But I will say the what was that question again? I do want to point out though that before I talked about again back with morality, the fact that I said, you know, we have to bond together as groups, and Bruce said, well, he's just picking this time frame, and then all he did was just turn and just pick a different time frame. Well, if you go before that time frame that he picked, you know, and what I was actually talking about was not 21st century. I was talking about the early hunters-gatherers, Indian original tribes, and that's how they came about. There was no monarchs or kings or whatever. They lived, children were raised by the group. That is what I was talking about, not 21st century and not monarchs in whatever, when the church was in power.
Well, Matt was asked, what's the purpose of life? He said, whatever your purpose is. So Hitler's purpose was to kill people.
Right, that's why we killed him.
Okay, well, there you go.
That's why, yes,
so I guess he's right then. So now, in regards to the whole idea of group mentality,
yeah.
this is, again, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary sociology, actually. And it's been debunked in many ways. And I'll give you one primary way that it shows its baselessness. Number one, if you look at the history, let's say, of tribes or the clans or family groupings in antiquity, all right, what do you inevitably see? The strongest one comes to be the leader. That's just history. And you get to see that person's wishes dominate the clan, the family, the group, the tribe. Well, again, if the person has in his mind it's okay to rape, it's okay to steal, it's okay to, you fill in the blank, then that's what's going to happen. Because people fear him. People will be subjugated to him. That's my point.
Okay, so last question for Bruce. Okay, so if everything happens randomly, we see that throughout nature, does that mean God is still in control of everything?
Well, again, they're making the assumption of randomness, and what we consider randomness, the Bible calls providence. So not even a sparrow falls to the ground apart from God's will, the Scripture says. So what we're perceiving as random isn't in fact random. Randomness doesn't exist. That again is a worldview. That's imposing the idea. Matt keeps saying, well, evolution is not a worldview. Well, then what is it? Okay, it's certainly not materialistic science. It's not something that's repeatable, testable, and verifiable in a test tube. You can't reproduce it right in front of us. Neither can the best evolutionist in the world. Thus, what is it? It's a belief system. Okay, so belief systems are just that. All right, and belief systems actually give you either a truth position or they give you a false position. That's what's ultimately going to realize. All right, and in actuality, you're going to have, all right, at the end of the day, a truth claim being made or the opposite, a falsity claim being made based upon what you perceive to be true. Either your perception is right or your perception is wrong. Okay, perceiving that things in randomness can create order, that order creates, that randomness creates order, or that morality can come from non-morality, or that the material can come from the non-material, is just pure, what? I mean, come on, think about it. What is it? It's absurdity. It means that you're not thinking logically. You're not taking seriously the whole idea of what's around you. And you're selecting what you want to partake of, and you're not even dealing with the larger question. All right? And the larger question is, why am I here? Who am I? Where am I going? These are the larger issues. Evolution chooses not to answer them. All right? Because from its basis of atheistic ideology, it can't answer those questions. There are no answers for that. All right? So that's where you go with that.
So explain the randomness.
About that really quick.
Yeah.
So evolution is a theory. It is an explanation of something, just like theory of gravity, cell theory. What does cell theory tell you about Adolf Hitler? So what is it? It's a theory. That's it's explanation of what goes on. So to expound on, say it came from atheistic. Well, how could it come from an atheistic background when Charles Darwin was a Christian? So I don't understand. These are not things that are true. When science doesn't tell you, science's goal is not to tell you how to live your life, how to be moral, how to interpret things. Science looks at the natural world. That's what science is, and it says here are things that happen, and then we have explanations or try to come up with explanations as to why they happen. Other than that, they create a nuclear bomb. It's our choice whether to actually detonate it or not. Not science doesn't tell you what to do with it.
Okay, last question for Matthew. If the DNA is different from one human to another human, is this case the same case for one chimpanzee to another?
One chimpanzee to another.
Yeah.
Because DNA is different in every life form. So, every life form. I don't know if that was. I don't mean to.
Yeah, no.
to be short with the question, but yes, it's different. Everything has its own different DNA and genetics.
Okay. How can you how can you explain the supposed evolution of an eye? Explain the evolution of an eye, basically.
There's a video called "The Evolution of an Eye." I will not do it. It's not that I don't want to or now, but I will not do it justice. You need to see it. You need to see all the different. There's a great video showing how it was. There was first a pinhole, okay, that just let in light, that was able to just. Basically all you would be able to see then on the brain is light and dark. Or it would be just a little bit lighter and then a little bit darker, and then it got a lens on it, and then it shows you. It goes through and it shows in which animals. By the way, going back to before, these things don't evolve. Like it's not like the eye evolved and then heart function evolved and then the circulatory system. They all evolved at the same time. It's not one thing. How did this happen and that happen and that happen? Like talk about bone marrow before, the red blood cells and the bone, like which came first? Neither came first. They both came at the same time. So that's just how it goes, right? Did God create the chicken first or the egg first?
Chicken. Are you done?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, yeah, again, it's like winning the lottery, like the Mega Millions, they got the lotto, they got all the big, lot. They've done the statistics. If you were to win all the major games, and let's say you go down to the deli, you buy 5 tickets, all the major games, and you find out tomorrow morning you won every single game, okay? That would have to happen, all right, literally dozens of times to even come to anywhere near what the chances of creating an eyeball would be. It just can't. It can't happen. It's not going to happen. And please don't go out and buy lottery tickets. I'm just saying, it can't happen. It's not that it won't happen. It can't happen. The mathematics are against it. It just can't happen. It's just like flipping that quarter. You can't get 50,000 heads in a row. You can't. It's impossible. It just can't happen. All right. So at the end of the day,
is it possible that every 50,000 times it will land on something?
Well, it's either going to be a head or a tail. I'm
Correct.
saying, without exception, heads in a row. It can't happen.
So the odds that 50,000 tosses would turn out to be something, you would say, wow, that's astronomical that 50,000 tosses turned out heads, tails, heads, tails. The same odds of getting that 1 in 50,000 is the same as getting heads 50,000 times.
No.
They're all the same, but you're putting emphasis on it landing on heads. It's going to land on something, and it's just as hard as those odds to come up as it is for it to come up the heads.
All right, maybe not. I'll make sure I rephrase it. This is what I mean. The simplest cell, right, the blue-green algae cell, the chances of it coming to pass have been estimated to be 1 to 50,000th coin toss. Okay, so.
And I'm
one chance of the coin coming up other than heads, all right, so it has to come up heads 50,000 times in a row, without exception, because then the clock restarts if it comes up a tail. It can't happen.
Okay. All right. Got out of hand there. One more question for Matthew. Explain the difference between microevolution and macroevolution, because many of us are taught this in school.
The difference between microevolution and macroevolution is nothing. Time. Let's put it that way. So, the difference between me walking from here to that chair and me to the chair in the back is just a little bit more time. As changes, evolution is just a change, and as changes keep. Again, if the universe, even if you're going 10,000 years, things are going to change, and eventually you're going to say they're different. Things are going to continue going on in time. So really the only thing is if you feel that it's not enough time has changed. But when we look at things and say, this has changed so much, dogs, when we breed dogs, we say, well, we know they're all dogs, but they're really different. If we kept breeding dogs the way we did for the next 4 million years, we would have completely different looking things. And we can keep going in one road to go down that road if we wanted to. That's all. That's the only difference between microevolution and macroevolution. It's just time.
Okay, this will be the last
1 minute rebuttal.
Okay, so microevolution, again, is that which we know can change. In other words, there are certain specific designs within the DNA of the genome that God has created, whether it's a bacteria, virus, or whether it's a human being. There's only certain limits, like the word strawberry. Before it becomes some other word, there's only certain change that can happen. So you can have strawberries, you can have strawberryness, but you can't have, if you leave out certain letters, it's no longer a strawberry at all. So once a mutation affects it, that's the only thing that's driving this is mutations. All right, mutations are random. Randomness cannot give you increased complexity of DNA, which you need to go from, let's say, an amphibian to a reptile to mammal. Thus, macroevolution can happen, microevolution can, because it's in a fixed area of pre-designed limits that God has already put in the DNA. It's just showing the variation of different genes, because you have recessive and dominant genes and so on. That's all it's showing. And if there is a mutation, it's usually negative, like cancer or sickle cell anemia, but it stays in that fixed area. Thank you.
I just want to say, look up frame shift mutation, and you will find out how genes can make more information.
Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you to Matthew Washington for coming out today. And for coming as well. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great night.